What if the young wolf kept his vow? What if Robb Stark never broke his word at all, and instead took a Frey bride beneath the cold stone arches of the twins? Let us step into that moment and see how a single vow, kept instead of broken, might reshape the fate of the North and all the Seven Kingdoms. Robb stands in the drafty hall of the twins, the air thick with the smell of river mud and old rushes. Walder Frey's brood is lined up before him, a living wall of pale faces and anxious eyes, daughters and granddaughters waiting to see which of them the young wolf will choose. This is not the quiet of a private betrothal. This is a court, a judgment, and a test of his father's lessons. He feels Catelyn's gaze on his back. He hears Walder's breathing, thin and wheezing on the high seat. The war has already cost him much. The death of his father, the weight of a king's crown in the north, the endless letters from lords begging for protection or promising aid. Now it demands something else. His marriage, his future, his heart. In another life, he would refuse. In another life, he would follow his desire and ride away from this hall toward a different bride, toward doom. But then, there is a first time for everything. In this life, Robb draws a steady breath and steps forward, choosing a Frey girl with clear eyes and a frightened smile, and in doing so, he binds House Stark to House Frey with iron chains of duty. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The twins do not become his grave. They become his gatehouse, his bridge, his greatest stronghold in the Riverlands. All Walder Frey does not sit plotting with Lannisters in the dark. He sits preening, proud that a king has married into his line, his injured pride soothed by the crown on his granddaughter's brow. It sounded like madness when I first read it, too. No red wedding, a living Robb, a Frey Stark heir in a cradle above the green fork, the banners of the trout, the dire wolf, and the twin towers flying side by side over a river that once ran red with betrayal. Yet, if Robb keeps his vow, Tywin's quiet letters and whispered promises lose their sharpest weapon. Frey resentment. From this choice, a new timeline unfolds. Every lord in the North and Riverlands must now reckon with a king who did not break faith. The Karstarks weigh their grief against his honor. The Greatjon boasts louder than ever of the young wolf who keeps his word. And even the Lannisters must reconsider how to end a war when treachery at a wedding table is no longer an option. In this story, we will follow those ripples, the political bargains at the twins, the strain in Catelyn's heart, Walder's brittle pride, and the long shadow of a Frey Stark child. Where does such a king lead the North, and how far does this one kept promise reach? The next step is to see how the wedding itself reshapes the board. Rewinding the war. Where canon breaks. To understand how that wedding at the twins remakes the war, we have to wind the board back to the moment it was first purchased. Before the songs, before the betrayal, there was only a river, a bridge, and a price. Robb rides south as his father's banners stream behind him, the dire wolf snapping in a cold wind that smells of rain and iron. He is not yet called king, only a young lord with a captured Jaime Lannister and a desperate need to cross the Green Fork. The twins rise ahead of him, ugly and impregnable, the stone embodiment of one man's pettiness and power. Walder Frey holds the only safe crossing between the northern and southern Riverlands. He knows exactly what that means. So does Robb. In the great hall of the twins, Robb hears the terms. One of Walder's daughters for his own hand, a Frey girl for a Stark lord, in exchange for passage and swords. He tastes the humiliation on his tongue as clearly as the watered wine. But he gives his word. Catelyn watches her son's jaw tighten as he nods, feeling both pride and dread twist together in her chest. This is the cost of war. This is the language of lords. In canon, that promise does not hold. On a later field, amid the stink of blood and herbs, Robb's loneliness and grief find comfort in Jane Westerling or Talisa, depending on which tale you follow. A bandaged king, a gentle hand, a moment of weakness that becomes a marriage. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that a single night could unmake an alliance, could give Tywin Lannister and Walder Frey the perfect pretext for a slaughter. Yet that is the fragile hinge. One broken vow, one insulted bridgelord, and the Red Wedding becomes not only possible, but inevitable. Here is where our road bends. In this timeline, the battlefield healer still appears, the temptation still comes. Robb still feels the ache of being a son who failed to save his father, a Stark who carries a crown he never sought. He wants for a heartbeat to forget he is a king, but he does not. He pulls back. He remembers the cold stones of the twins, the thin smile of Walder Frey, the weight of his own word. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The decision shreds him in ways no sword ever could. Alone in his tent, Robb presses his hands to his eyes until he sees stars, hearing again the soft voice that offered him comfort, the life he refused. Catelyn feels the difference when she looks at him, relief that he has honored his promise, terror at binding her house to Walder's brood. Around them, northern lords watch in silence. Some approve of his discipline. Some resent the thought of a Frey queen in the north. All understand that their fates are now tied to that bridge. Back at the twins, Walder Frey receives the confirmation with a dry chuckle and a glint of satisfaction. The wolf has not slipped the leash this time. There is no wounded pride for Tywin to weaponize, no insult to twist into a wedding trap. Tywin must seek a different road. Walder must pretend, at least for now, to be a loyal bannerman whose grandchild may one day sit in Winterfell. Then, there is a first time for everything. From this single brutally pragmatic choice flows a different war. No red wedding, a Frey bride at Robb's side, altered alliances in the Riverlands, and a king in the north who has chosen duty over desire. The next question is simple and terrible. What does Robb Stark do with a life he has paid for in his own happiness? The vow kept. Robb's wedding night at the twins. The twins are loud that night, but it is not the roar of slaughter. It is the clatter of trenchers, the thin music of Frey fiddles, and the low, watchful murmur of northern men who drink with one hand and keep the other near their steel. The great hall is hung with House Frey's blue and gray, yet every banner of the wolf seems to bite back at them from the rafters. Robb sits beneath those wolves. The young wolf, the boy who broke the Lannisters in the field, now sweating in a hall that smells of onions, wet wool, and old grievances. He forces himself to smile as Walder Frey raises yet another mocking toast, each one a reminder of the insult that never came to pass in this timeline. To the Lord who keeps his word, Walder cackles, thin voice cutting through the music like a knife. The phrase lands heavy. Robb hears his father in it. He hears the letter in it. He drinks. At his side sits the girl who has changed everything without speaking a single word in council. Rosalind Frey in the show was gentle and soft. Here, Robb's bride is another daughter, Mara Frey, third born by one of Walder's later wives. Dark hair braided back with river pearls, eyes sharp as broken glass, hands steady on her cup. She had watched him when he first entered the hall, not with adoration, but with calculation. Now, as the Septon's words fade and the bedding songs begin, she is pale but composed. She understands what it means to be a queen in the north in waiting, even if no crown has yet touched her brow. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. A Frey girl who is not merely a pawn, but a listener. A quiet ledger of slights and favors, sitting where Jane Westerling never would. When Walder jokes about his little Mora warming Stark winters, she does not flinch. She watches the northern lords instead, and measuring who laughs, who looks away. Catelyn Stark feels every one of those looks. She remembers her own wedding feast, the Tully banners, the stranger she was promised to for the sake of a river and a war. She remembers thinking that duty would be a cold bedfellow. Now she watches her son take a Frey hand and wonders if she has asked him to pay the same price she once paid to tie Riverrun to Winterfell. Humiliation burns, a Tully and a Stark bound to this leering old man and his brood. But beneath it, there is a thin, desperate relief. No open dishonor, no broken pact for Tywin Lannister to twist into a knife. Across the table, Walder Frey basks. In the true timeline, insult curdled into murder. Here, validation ripens into ambition. He imagines Maera's child in Winterfell, his blood seated where kings of winter once ruled. He tallies the tolls that will pass these bridges, the ravens that will fly from the twins to every great house now forced to treat him as more than a petty lord of a crossing. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that one marriage could stay his hand. Yet as he preens, as he orders more wine and louder music, the red wedding dissolves like smoke. The bedding is raucous, but not cruel. Northern men are wary, River lords are cautious. Freys are overeager. Robb lets them pull away his cloak and boots, jaw clenched, eyes on Mara's. In that brief private moment before the doors close, he sees fear there and resolve, and something else he cannot yet name. Then there is a first time for everything. He has kept his word. The twins are secured. The banners still fly, wolves and trout and twin towers all under one roof. Yet as the candles gutter and the music frays, an uneasier truth settles over the hall. By binding House Stark to House Frey, Robb may have traded one kind of death for another. Not daggers in the dark, but a slower, subtler danger winding itself into his line. And far away in the north, where another king now weighs his own impossible choices, the consequences of this wedding are already beginning to move. A different twins. From death trap to power base. The candles in the twins burn low, but outside those drafty halls, the shape of the war itself has shifted. One marriage feast has redrawn the map. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. For Robb, the truth settles in the morning after, as he stands atop the battlements beside the Blackfish and looks down at the Green Fork. The river is broad, cold, and merciless, and cutting the riverlands in two. The twins are not merely two ugly towers now. They are the only great stone bridge between the northern and southern riverlands, the hinge on which his entire campaign can turn. Robb has crossed them once before as a supplicant. Now he holds them as a son. He feels the difference in his bones. Before, the twins were a toll gate. Pay the price, rush across, pray Lord Walder's temper does not sour. One mistake, and the bridge slams shut behind him. Now, with a Frey bride in his bed and Frey grandchildren already being toasted in crude jests, that crossing becomes permanent, stable, predictable. The North is no longer a distant homeland he may never see again. It is a week's hard ride away, along a road he controls. Under that new certainty, strategy transforms. Thus, the twins become a warehouse for grain from the Neck and the Barrowlands, a rallying point for fresh northern levies, a safe ford for maesters and ravens bearing word from Jon and the other lords of the north. Robb can stage raids into the Westerlands, strike across the Red Fork, and always have a secure line of retreat. Long trains of supply wagons can move under Frey banners, guarded by men whose father now has a personal stake in keeping his royal son. Bylaw alive. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Walder Frey, loyal. Yet here, the old man's calculations are simple. A living king in the north who has honored his word is worth more than any Lannister promise. Every Frey rider who dies for Robb now dies for the future of House Frey itself. That means Frey levies are not grudging afterthoughts, but an integrated part of Robb's host. River traffic along the Green Fork and the Trident can be directed, taxed, and weaponized in his favor. Barges bring timber for siege engines, salted fish for the men, even whispered messages from sympathetic river lords who dare not ride north, but can float unseen beneath Lannister scouts. In the true timeline, this was always a knife's edge. Robb knew that every step south took him farther from Winterfell and deeper into Lord Walder's resentment. Here, that resentment is cooled by pride. The twins are no longer a trap waiting to be sprung. They are a power base that must be defended. So, a question begins to gnaw at Tywin's careful plans. Long before he ever hears the word wedding. If the bridge he meant to turn into a slaughterhouse is now Robb Stark's strongest fortress, does the Red Wedding ever truly come to life at all? Or must the Lannisters find some darker, riskier path to break the North and the White Dragon's claim? Walder Frey's pride. A new kind of treachery. Tywin's question hangs over the map like a shadow, but at the twins, another shadow is shifting. Walder Frey is no longer the insulted tollkeeper waiting to be avenged. He is a father whose blood now sits beside a king. In the great hall of the twins, Walder watches Robb with small, sharp eyes, drinking in every "your grace" spoken in his presence. His whole life has been a ledger of slights, late to battle, late to be rewarded, late to be remembered. Now, with one marriage, the ledger changes. A king in the north has taken a Frey to wife. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. He boasts of it endlessly. To his sons, to his bastards, to any river lord forced to pass his tables, he repeats the same word like a prayer. King. The North may whisper that the Freys are jumped-up bridge keepers, but Walder now has a different story. Once, great houses ignored his claim to respect. Now, he says, they must cross his bridge and bow to his granddaughter, the future Lady of Winterfell, perhaps the mother of a Stark heir. Then there is a first time for everything. Robb feels the weight of that pride each time Walder leans forward and calls him son. It is not warmth, it is ownership. Robb hears his father's voice in memory, warning that a man so hungry for recognition never truly stops feeding. The truth of that becomes clear as Walder begins to scheme, not for blood, but for seats. A grandson placed as castellan in the Trident, a granddaughter in White Harbor, a Frey boy squired at Winterfell under Jon's eye, so that when the White Dragon rides south, a Frey banner rides with him. Outwardly, Walder is loyal. How could he not be? His fortune is now tied to Robb's victories, to the survival of House Stark against the Lannisters. When word comes of a Lannister setback in the West, he laughs too loudly and orders more wine. When a letter arrives from King's Landing, hinting at terms and pardons, he has it read twice, then carefully burned. Robb watches the flames and cannot shake the sense that Walder was not burning temptation, only postponing it. Because Walder still listens. He listens when Frey riders bring rumors of Tywin's gold, of southern lords who might prefer bridges to kings. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Robb thinks of Jon's letter and hidden parentage. Yet here is another madness. A man who will sell anything, but only at the highest price. So, the Red Wedding never takes shape, but something colder does. A slow encirclement. A patient poisoning of councils, of marriages, of succession itself. If Robb falls, Walder will claim he was forced. If Robb triumphs, Walder will claim he made the king. And in the quiet between campaigns, another question begins to whisper through the North. Has Robb Stark truly escaped betrayal? Or has he only invited it into his own bed, to wake beside him when the next darker offer arrives? In Northern eyes, on a Frey queen. The whisper does not stay a whisper for long. It rides with the ravens and the returning riders, until every hall from White Harbor to the last hearth is weighing the same sight. A Frey girl seated beside their king, wearing wolf pelts over a pale blue dress. The Great Jon is the first to break the tension. In the great hall of Riverrun, he roars with laughter so loud the rafters seem to shake, claps Robb hard on the back, and bellows that if the price of breaking the Lannisters is one Frey bride, then Robb has gotten off cheap. His words are half jest, half challenge, daring any lord to gainsay the king in front of him. No one does, not yet. But Robb feels the other eyes. Lord Rickard Karstark's gaze is colder, measuring, as if he is counting not only swords but bloodlines. Oh, a Frey queen means Frey heirs, Frey blood in the Stark line, Frey voices in the councils that should belong to the oldest houses of the North. Rickard gives the courtesies, speaks the right word of fealty. Yet in his silence, Robb hears a question he cannot answer easily. Is this the price his father would have paid? Smaller houses shift in their seats, proud men from forgotten valleys and long winters. To them, House Frey is a bridge toll dressed up as nobility, a petty, craven, southern-leaning brood that sneered at the old gods for generations. Now, one of them wears a dire wolf clasp at her throat. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, Robb thinks, remembering the letter that made him king in the North and bound him to choices like this. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. E.T. Catelyn moves through it all like a woman walking a frozen lake, every step deliberate. In public, she is the mediator, the queen's mother, who reminds the lords that their own fathers wed for alliances, that a king's marriage is a weapon, not a song. In private, by candlelight, she watches the Frey girl sleep beside her son and cannot quiet the fear that the next Stark generation will not quite be Stark, that the old strength of Winterfell will be diluted one compromise at a time. Beyond the high tables, the small folk and soldiers whisper. Some say the young wolf has gone soft, letting an old bridge lord leash him with a daughter's smile. Others argue that only a shrewd king turns an enemy into kin, that this is how you end wars without losing more fathers and sons. Jon would have understood this, Robb thinks. And the thought hurts more than he expects. Then there is a first time for everything. The first time a Frey is cheered in a northern camp. The first time a man from Barrowton refuses to drink with a man from the Twins. With that, The gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name, but the sound is not as whole as before, and beneath that fractured roar, a seed is planted. If the war drags, if victories turn to stalemates and stalemates to defeats, every grudge against the Freys will have a new face to wear. When the North starts asking who led them to ruin, will they still see only Robb Stark or the pale Frey queen at his side? Tywin, without a red wedding, strategy in crisis. Fair to the south, in the redstone halls of the Hand, that same seed of doubt reaches Tywin Lannister as word filters down from the twins. Robb Stark has kept his vow. The young wolf has taken a Frey to wife, and Walder's banners fly beside the direwolf and trout. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Tywin sits in the council chamber, candles guttering low, the painted table before him littered with raven scrolls. In the canon, we know his path is cruel but clear. A broken oath, a spurned daughter, a bridge lord whose pride festers into hatred. He reads Walder Frey's wounded letters, sees a man who has been insulted before and swallowed it, and understands that this time the old lord wants blood, not apologies. A wedding feast becomes a battlefield. Honor becomes a weapon. One stroke, and the North loses its king, its bannermen, its hope. Here, that lever is gone. Walder's pride has been fed, not starved. His daughter is not a discarded pawn, but a queen-to-be, the mother of whatever sons Robb might have. To ask him to murder Robb now is to ask him to murder his own blood's best chance at a crown. Tywin knows men like Walder. They will sell many things, but they do not sell the dream of their grandson as king. He listens as Pycelle drones about supply lines, as Cersei hisses that wolves must be put down, as Kevin quietly notes that the North still holds the twins and the neck of the Riverlands. Tywin's jaw tightens. The simple, clean solution has vanished. It sounded like madness when I first read it, too, the idea of Walder Frey refusing a Lannister plot. Yet the truth of this timeline makes it almost inevitable. So he turns to darker, slower tools, scorched earth in the Riverlands, burning harvests from the Red Fork to the Tumblestone. Oh, to starve Robb's host and break the Tully lords beneath a rain of ash. Whispered gold to the Karstarks and Umbers, promises of titles and southern marriages. Quiet offers that their own claim to favor might rise higher if Robb falters. And in the shadows, Varys hears the word accident spoken too calmly. A hunting mishap, a wayward arrow, a cup of wine that stills the young wolf's heart. But every path carries a cost. Open atrocities in the Riverlands risk turning every small folk grievance into a banner against the crown. Burned fields do not ask which lord they serve. A failed assassination does worse. It makes a martyr in waiting of Robb Stark, a son who lost his father to one king and survived a knife sent by another. Then there is a first time for everything, Tywin thinks, even for a Lannister miscalculation that cannot be hidden. Iha stares at the map, at the long road through winter and dwindling gold, and measures time itself as an enemy. Without one bloody feast to end it all, is he condemned to a grinding war of attrition against the North and the Riverlands, a war the Lannisters may not be able to sustain? And if this careful, ruthless father chooses the long game, who will break first? The young wolf in the field, or the old lion in his tower? The Riverlands recalculated, Tully, Frey, and Stark Tywin counts ledgers and grain. In the Riverlands, other men begin counting blood. Because when Robb takes a Frey bride instead of spurning one, the map itself seems to twist. Traditionally, it is simple. The Tullys are the red-trouted heart of the Trident, liege lords of every river house. The Freys, for all their stone and timber at the twins, are still viewed as up-jump toll-keepers, men whose bridge matters more than their blood. But with one marriage, that chain of loyalty no longer runs in a straight line. Now there is Riverrun, there is the twins, and above both there is a Stark king in the north, bound to House Frey by the bed and to House Tully by his mother. Edmure Tully feels that shift before anyone needs to speak a word. In the solar at Riverrun, he listens as ravens bring news of feasts at the twins, of Walder boasting that his grandson is son to a king. Edmure is still their liege lord, yet the old man across the Green Fork now has a claim of his own, kinship to the young wolf. It sounded like madness when I first read it, too. But if this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Brynden Blackfish is colder about it. He stands over campaign maps, always tracing lines from the north to the Twins, from the Twins to the Westerlands. The Freys control the crossing, they control the new queen's womb, and through her, they may one day claim a voice in the Stark succession. He sees at once the danger and the opportunity. A loyal crossing is a sword at Tywin's throat. An overmighty Frey is a knife at Riverrun's back. At councils, that tension becomes flesh. Frey envoys press for more, say in Riverland's strategy, arguing that their bridge bears the weight of every northern host. Tully captains bristle, reminding them whose banners first answered the call when the Lannisters burned the Riverlands. Robb sits between them, feeling the pull of two prides, his father's lessons on fealty war with the hard truth of the map. If he leans too far toward Riverrun, he risks slighting the bridge that feeds his war. If he favors the Freys, he risks hollowing out the very heart of the trident he swore to protect for his mother's sake. Smaller river lords watch all of this with sharp, measuring eyes. Some drift toward Edmure, trusting the old order and the memory of Hoster Tully. Others begin to court Frey favor, reasoning that the Twins are closer to the Stark center of gravity now than Riverrun itself. Then, there is a first time for everything. Perhaps they think the surest path to their young king's ear runs not through the Red Trout, but through the twin towers on the Green Fork. So, a triangle forms: Tully, Frey, Stark. On good days, it looks like a fortress around Robb's claim. On bad days, it looks like three stones straining against the same rope. In a war already shredding oaths and fathers' names, no one can yet say whether this new balance will hold, or whether the first serious defeat, the first whispered betrayal, will shatter the Riverlands into rival camps. And as word of new fires and new raids rides up from the south, Robb cannot escape one question. If his base breaks, what does any victory over the Lannisters truly win him? Marching under a Frey banner? The new campaign south. Those fires from the south do not stop Robb. They harden him. If the Riverlands are to be saved, then this fragile new balance around the Twins must not simply endure. It must march. So, the banners are called again. This time, when the host forms beneath the cold autumn sky. It is not only dire wolves and trouts whipping in the wind, but the twin towers of House Frey riding beside them. Not skulking in the rear, but pressing for the vanguard. Men who once muttered about a sullen toll now speak of a proud union. Their lord's daughter is a Stark queen of the north in all but name, and they will not be seen to shame her. Robb rides along the column, gray wind pacing at his stirrup, watching the mingled lines of Stark, Tully, and Frey. Men tramp south between hedgerows and smoking ruins. He hears the word king whispered again and again. But it is the memory of his father's last letter, of Jon's hidden claim, that tightens his jaw. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. He cannot think only as a grieving son now. He must think as the guardian of a realm that may one day have to accept a different Targaryen truth. The first test comes in the deep woods along the King's Road, near the place that will be called the Whispering Wood in 100 songs. Only this time, the songs are different. Frey riders, born within sight of the Green Fork, fan out ahead, slipping down forgotten cattle tracks and river paths their grandfathers used to cheat tolls. They return with precise counts of Lannisters, of pickets, of where the fords run shallow and where the ground will swallow horses whole. Robb listens. That is the change. In the candlelit war tent, as the Great John roars for a head-on clash and Blackfish sketches flanking maneuvers, a lean, hawk-nosed Frey, Sir Perwyn, perhaps, or young Olivar, quietly proposes a twisting night march that uses every bend of the river to mask their approach. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, Robb admits to himself, tracing the plan on the map. Then there is a first time for everything. The trap closes. Jaime Lannister still rides into darkness and chaos, still hears the howls of northern men all around him, but now the songs that follow speak of Frey outriders who cut off the retreat. Of Frey bowmen on the far bank, whose arrows find every gap in gilded armor. House Frey, once a byword for cowardice, begins to slip into ballads as sharp-eyed and river-wise. Robb feels the shift even more sharply than he hears it. Around his council fire, certain Frey captains are no longer faceless toll-keepers, but men whose counsel he seeks, whose loyalty he tests and rewards. Each bond he forges is a stone laid in a new foundation, one that may outlast old Walder's spite and, in time, drag the whole house toward a different heir. With the twins secure as a living artery of grain, men, and messages, his campaign surges forward. Victories stack one upon another like shields in a wall, and with each one, the legend of the young wolf grows more impossible to assail. With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name. Yet, Robb feels the weight behind that cheer. Every mile he gains, every Frey-made hero in a song, raises the cost of any future stumble. If Tywin Lannister cannot break him in the field, what more desperate, more poisonous answer will the old lion seek in the dark? Inside the Frey household, a bride's new power. The cheer in the hall fades, but at the twins, the echo of that cheer reshapes a single life. One Frey girl, one face among many in Walder's crowded brood, finds herself lifted from the benches to the high seat beside the young wolf. Yesterday she was a minor daughter in a drafty tower. Today men call her my lady, with a stiffness that almost sounds like my queen. She feels the falseness in it. She feels the danger too. In her father's hall, she learned to listen before she spoke, to count every glance and weigh every word, because a misplaced jest could mean a lost marriage, a lost future, a lost claim to even the smallest comfort. Now, as Robb walks the camp and she walks half a step behind, she applies the same sharpness. Who sneers when she passes? Who bows too low? Who looks at her and sees a Frey usurping a seat that should have belonged to some great northern lady of old blood? If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Because the Frey girl is not foolish, and she is not blind. She knows that somewhere, in another telling of this war, Robb might have followed his heart instead of his oath. She lives in the space carved out by that choice, and it is a space filled with ghosts. Catelyn Stark watches her first, as one might watch a trap, polite, distant, eyes measuring. The older woman remembers the weight of being a Riverlands bride in a northern hall, remembers standing where this girl now stands. It sounded like madness when I first read it, too. Catelyn thinks of Ned's letter about Jon, about claims and hidden truths. But there is another madness here, trusting a Frey with the future of House Stark, yet days turn into weeks and war leaves little room for simple distrust. In the privacy of a tent or a borrowed solar at the Twins, Catelyn begins to speak plainly. This is what the North expects of a lady. This is how you answer a lord who has lost 2 sons. This is how you sit a high seat when the king is away and the grain is short. The girl listens, asks careful questions, repeats each lesson back until Cat is sure she understands. A wary politeness twists, slowly, into something like mentorship. Outside those walls, the judgments are harsher. Karstark men mutter about Frey treachery. Small northern lords grumble that a bridge lord's daughter now sits where a Mormont or an Umber might have. But river knights see a different thing, a living bond between Winterfell and the Twins, a promise that this war will not forget the Tully lands bled white between Lannisters and Freys. In the quiet hours, when Robb is gone to council and the campfires burn low, her thoughts turn to children not yet born, a son with stark gray eyes, Tully coloring, and Frey blood in his veins. Again, a daughter whose very name would be a treaty. Then there is a first time for everything, she tells herself when fear presses in. A first heir to bind 3 restless rivers of loyalty into one. But every tenderness from Robb cuts both ways. He is kind, he is dutiful, he is never cruel, and because he is none of those things, she feels the absence most of all. He speaks of honor, of his father, of letters and oaths, and the long shadow of the North. He does not speak of the love he might have chosen instead of her. That silence becomes her crown. It is lighter than gold and far more painful to bear. And as word of Jon's rising star in the North begins to reach even the camp at the Twins, she realizes that she and Robb are not the only ones living in the wake of a choice that saved a kingdom and broke something inside them both. Karstark, Bolton, and the question of loyalty. The nights after the wedding grow longer, heavier. The songs speak of victory and new alliances, but in the quiet between tents, grief still walks the camp like a restless ghost. It wears Rickard Karstark's face. He stands at the edge of the firelight, watching Frey banners ripple beside the direwolf, and feels only the absence of his sons. In the true history, Each defeat, each humiliation, drove him closer to the breaking point, until Lannister boys in chains became the only coin he could pay his rage with. Here, Robb's word to the Freys has been kept. The campaign is steadier, and the king he follows has not been shamed before half the realm. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Robb sees it as clearly as he sees the letter that once made Jon a king. Easy a stronger front, a proud Frey bride at his side, fewer whispers of broken oaths. Yet when Catelyn returns the Lannister hostages to win her daughter's safety, the same old wound is torn open in Karstark's chest. His father's honor tells him Robb is right to value the girls. His hatred tells him the Lannisters must bleed. One night, he chooses hatred. The corpses of Willem Lannister and Tion Frey are laid out beneath flickering torches. Robb's body goes rigid when he hears. He feels the North itself sway under his feet. In another life, he answered this with a headsman's sword and the loss of a great house. Here, with Frey eyes on him and his own queen's brothers among the dead, the choice is even crueler. If he kills Rickard, he avenges the king's peace but shatters Karstark's strength. If he spares him, now he looks weak before the Freys and every lord who has buried a son. The hall holds its breath as Robb weighs judgment, remembering Jon's quiet warning that a king who spends men's lives carelessly will one day find no lives left to spend. He chooses a third path: exile, forfeiture of lands, and the taking of Carhold into royal custody until this war is done. Rickard rides north in chains, not to a headsman, but to the wall. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Then there is a first time for everything. Rose Bolton watches all of this with hooded eyes. No red wedding to host, no easy path to Lannister favor. And now, a North that stands more unified than any lord in the Dreadfort finds comfortable. Quiet letters still fly, of course. Whispers from Casterly Rock, and promises that a man who delivers the White Dragon and the Young Wolf might be raised higher than any warden. At the same time, other letters spread a different poison. That a Frey queen at Robb's side proves southern corruption has already seeped into Winterfell's halls. Bolton listens, Bolton counts, Bolton waits. So the question becomes simple and terrible. Without the Red Wedding, has the North escaped its darkest betrayal, or has treachery merely moved to another field, waiting for a bloodier dawn? A war of attrition. Can the Lannisters bleed the wolf dry? Bolton waits, but the war does not. It grinds on. On parchment, the Lannisters should win. Their gold buys food, sellswords, ships, and silence. Their banners can still call tens of thousands from the Westerlands and the Crownlands. Like yet every raven Robb receives from the North reminds him of a different kind of strength. Hard men who have survived 6-month winters, a people who will eat bark and boiled leather before they yield, and a Riverlands whose rivers and bogs turn every march into a bleeding slog. The numbers favor the lion. The land favors the wolf. Robb studies the maps in Riverrun's solar until the candle stubs burn his fingers. A long war is terrible math. Every month his host sits. The North starves a little more, and word comes of small folk freezing or fleeing. But every month Tywin's coffers empty as well, paying for grain brought over leagues of torn country, and for garrisons and towns that hate him. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Victory is no longer a single crushing battle. It is who can endure the slow suffocation. The twins become the hinge of that endurance. With Walder's honor secured by a Frey queen at his side, Robb can use the crossing as a living artery. Men from the north rotate south to fight, and then back again to rest, while fresh levies and supplies move over the Green Fork under Frey banners. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. The idea that Robb Stark's greatest weakness could become his strongest fortress. Then, there is a first time for everything. From this secure bridge, the young wolf changes his tactics. No more desperate gambles deep into the Westerlands seeking a single glorious victory. Instead, smaller, sharper raids slash at Lannister foraging parties, burn their depots, and vanish into river mist. Tywin is forced to chase shadows, to hold more castles than he can truly garrison. To watch his proud knights die not in shining charges, but in muddy ambushes on nameless roads. The small folk pay the price. Villages in the Riverlands are trampled again and again, first by one army, then the other, until the people there no longer care who calls himself king, only who burn their fields. Yet when Lannister men-at-arms hang a miller's son or take a daughter for sport, those memories do not fade, they fester. From those ashes, men slip away to join Robb, to ride with Beric's brotherhood without banners, to fight under any lord who swears to strike at Lannisters. In King's Landing, the war feels endless. Joffrey rages at each report that the Wolf Boy still holds the field, that the North refuses to kneel to his claim. Cersei sees enemies in every whisper. He makes certain that Tyrell's smiles hide Stark sympathies, and that even within the Red Keep, the truth about Joffrey's birth is one careless word away from disaster. Tywin, far from the city he means to rule through fear, grinds his teeth as letters speak of skirmishes won, but no king taken, of gold spent, but no peace bought. Robb feels the same drag in his bones. Every lord at his war council has lost sons. Every raven brings another name, yet the crown's fear is a weapon too. So the war becomes a test not only of swords, but of faith, of patience, of promises made when the banners first rose. And in such a war of attrition, one question grows heavier than any armor. Which side will crack first? Not the weaker in numbers, but the one whose alliances, oaths, and secret grudges finally snap. Somewhere between the Twins and King's Landing, the first of those cracks is already forming. Sansa, Arya, and a different northern future. Somewhere between the Twins and King's Landing, that crack has a name. Sansa. Word of Robb's Frey marriage does not reach her as a tender family notice, but as a weapon, wrapped in silk and poison. A Lannister courtier reads the raven in the Queen's solar, voice light with amusement, as he announces that the young wolf has taken a Frey girl to wife, that some muddy-blooded daughter of the Crossing now styles herself Lady over Winterfell's ancient stones. Sansa's hands fold in her lap. They tremble only once. Then they are still. She pictures the great hall of the North, the high seat where her father sat, where she once imagined herself beside a golden-haired king. Now she is the hostage, the ornament, and while some Frey she has never met is carried to her home as queen in all but name. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, she thinks, remembering Robb's letter that never came, the promise that he would win her freedom. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The Lannisters see that, and they move quickly. At feasts, singers are paid to mock the new alliance, turning Walder Frey's brood into the butt of every jest. They sneer that Robb is desperate, that a true king weds a Tyrell rose, not a river rat from a half-built castle. Cersei lets such barbs flourish, because every laugh at the Frey bride is also a laugh at the Stark claim. Sansa listens, cheeks burning, forced to smile when Joffrey demands it, and each cruel song slowly reshapes her understanding of her brother's war. Is Robb winning, or merely surviving? Far from the Red Keep's polished floors, Arya walks through mud and ash in the Riverlands and hears a different version. In smoky inns and broken villages, men speak of a Frey queen in the north with grudging respect. The Twins, they say, are now the young wolf's gatehouse, his bridge of iron and stone. Some curse the Freys for choosing sides. Others mutter that Lord Walder has finally backed a true king. Arya says nothing, but the name Frey carves itself into her memory. Then there is a first time for everything. She had known the Freys only as the ones who made her mother beg at the crossing, the ones who shut their gates while the Riverlands burned. Now they are bound to Robb by marriage and oath. When she later slips through the shadows of the Twins, or hears a Frey voice raised in arrogance, that history will sharpen her hatred. Not only for what they did, but for what they almost were to her family. In the long term, that Frey girl in Winterfell is more than a name on a marriage contract. She changes futures. Southern lords who might have sought Sansa's hand as a bridge to the north must now reckon with a Frey brood already seated in the heart of Stark power. Offers shift. Perhaps Sansa is dangled before the Vale, or before some lesser river lord, as a counterweight to Walder's rising pride. Arya's path, too, is altered. A Stark daughter who returns to a Winterfell half-Frey may find herself promised to a northern house that mistrusts the crossing, or to a river knight meant to soothe bruised egos. From Robb's vantage, this is the cost he never fully measured at the Twins. His choice to keep his word does not only hold his army together, in it redraws the home his sisters dream of, the Godswood they remember, the hall where their father spoke of honor, now echoes with Frey laughter, Frey fears, Frey ambitions. The War of Kings may be fought in fields and keeps, but for Sansa and Arya, the true battle is over what the word Winterfell will mean when they finally see it again. And as the seasons turn, another question begins to form, quiet but relentless. When the Stark sisters at last step through those gates, will they be coming home? Or walking into a stranger's castle that only wears their name? If the Red Wedding never comes, what ends the war? For Sansa and Arya, that question hangs over Winterfell. For Robb, a different question gnaws at him every night as he stares into the fire. If he has kept his vows, if he has married the Frey girl as promised, then how does this war end now? Because with that marriage, one thing becomes clear. There is no Red Wedding. Walder Frey has his prize. His daughter seated beside a king of the north, his banners marching at the head of the Stark host. His bridge made the beating heart of Robb's supply lines. The old lord may still mutter about slights and pride, but the core insult that poisoned him in the first place never comes. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. In this altered river of time, Tywin cannot simply buy betrayal with a bride and a promise. He must reach for older tools, steel in the field, gold in the shadows, words that turn proud lords against their young king. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. A world where the twins are Robb's fortress instead of his grave, yet the logic holds. Without the broken vow, then there is no shared feast, no signal song, no crossbow bolts in the dark. So, what ends the war instead? Perhaps it is the simplest answer: a battle. A true catastrophe, not at a wedding table, but on some muddy field between the Trident and the Golden Tooth, where Robb overreaches or is finally outplayed. His host shattered, he is forced back across the Green Fork, alive but beaten. His claim to be the young wolf turned into a half-whispered jest in southern courts. Or the end comes slowly, through parchment rather than lances. With the phrase secured, Robb can hold the river crossings indefinitely, raiding the Westerlands, bleeding Lannister gold. The Lannisters, bound now to the Tyrells after Renly's death, must show strength to their new partners. A living Robb is an insult they cannot ignore. Yet every campaign costs coin, men, fees and time that the Reach Lords would rather spend on harvests than on northern grudges. Under that pressure, a negotiated peace begins to whisper through council chambers. Hostages traded, borders fixed. Jon's higher claim left unresolved, like a sword hanging over every feast. There is a darker road as well, an arrow loosed from a shadowed wood, a cup poured by the wrong hand in some minor lord's hall. An assassin's knife that finds Robb's heart, but not his army, leaving a howling, leaderless host still sworn to House Stark, still able to call banners in the north, still clinging to the memory of the boy who was their king. Then there is a first time for everything. A war that does not break at a wedding must break somewhere else. As we move forward, hold this in mind. If not at the twins, at what single moment will become the emotional and political breaking point of this alternate war? Walder's calculus shifts. Could he still betray the wolf? A war that does not break at a wedding will still grind men down in the mud and snow. Months stretch into years, and at the twins, the cost of Robb Stark's honored promise begins to show in Walder Frey's ledger. The old lord sits in his drafty hall, listening to reports that sound the same, and yet cut a little deeper each time. Tolls on the Green Fork have withered, merchants avoid a war zone. Frey outriders lie dead in the fields of the West, their bodies never brought home. Grandsons vanish into Robb's campaigns and come back on wagons, if they come back at all. At first, Walder had preened when he spoke the word queen and meant his own daughter. Then now he mutters it like a curse. Pride sours into resentment. The wolf's war is bleeding his bridge dry. Robb feels it, even if he does not yet name it. When he rides through the twins between strokes of the campaign, he sees fewer smirks and more hollow eyes. He tells himself this is the price every house must pay for the North and Riverlands to be free of the Lannisters. Yet in quiet moments, he remembers his father's letter and the truth that had set this all in motion. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. A king cannot afford to lose a crossing like this, and he cannot afford to lose the frail loyalty of the man who holds it. Into that weariness, Lannister gold arrives like a rumor given flesh. An envoy from the Rock is allowed over the bridge, under heavy guard. He bows low before Lord Walder. I was speaking softly of titles in the West, of royal marriages for younger Frey girls, of debt forgiven and coffers refilled if the twins return to the king's peace and correct the mistake of ever backing a Stark. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, but it is exactly the sort of poisoned reason Tywin would send across a river. Walder listens. Of course he does, yet his eyes keep drifting to the high seat where Robb's Frey queen sometimes sits, hand resting on a swelling belly. That child, if the gods are kind, could be the future lord of Winterfell, blood of Stark and Frey together. To betray Robb now is to wager that life against Lannister promises, to risk his own line's greatest prize on the turn of a knife. So, Walder counts other options. Betrayal need not be a feast and a song. Oh, it can be a delayed raven's flight when Robb calls for aid, a bridge held closed for a single crucial day, a whispered word that lets a Lannister raiding party slip past. It can be a half-hearted defense if Tywin ever dares a direct assault on the twins, spears breaking a little too quickly, a gate bar accidentally left weak. Robb senses the danger without seeing its shape. He rides away each time with banners still flying, but something in his chest remains tight. Then, there is a first time for everything. A first hint of hesitation from a sworn ally. A first order that is obeyed too slowly. Can he ever truly trust a man like Walder Frey, even as kin, when the next great choice of this war comes crashing toward the river? And that choice is coming sooner than anyone at the twins dares to admit. Robb's heart versus. His crown. The love. He didn't choose. That choice is coming for Robb long before it reaches the war table. It reaches him first in a quiet field hospital outside the Golden Tooth, where the smell of blood and boiled leather hangs heavier than any banner. In canon, this is where he would have met her. Jane Westerling in the books, Talisa Maegir in the show. A soft voice among the groans of dying men, a steady hand stitching closed the wounds his command had opened. Here, he still meets her. The same startled glance when the young wolf steps into the tent, the same sharp words when he tries to apologize for the hurt his war has caused. The pull is there. It is undeniable. But this time, there is a Frey girl waiting at the twins. Robb listens as Jane speaks of fathers and brothers lost to the Lannisters, of small folk who care nothing for any king's claim, only for the next winter. He feels seen. He feels young. For a moment, the weight of Ned's letter, of Jon's hidden truth, of the North's expectations, slips from his shoulders. Then he remembers the wedding cloak laid over him beneath Walder Frey's roof. He remembers the shy, fierce way his Frey bride lifted her chin when she swore to be a Stark. He steps back. He chooses distance. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that Robb Stark could walk away from the one woman who truly understands his doubt. Yet, he does. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. In the nights that follow, the cost of that choice stalks him like a ghost. He lies beside his Frey queen in a campaign tent, listening to the river wind tug at the canvas. She is dutiful, quick-witted, eager to prove that she is more than a bridge his father bought with a promise. He is grateful for her loyalty, for the way she studies maps and asks sharp questions about the Karstarks and the Blackfish. And yet, there is distance. He thinks of Jane's hands, stained with blood that was not her own, and wonders what kind of king he might have been, with a queen who challenged his very belief in this war. That wondering hardens him. Robb becomes colder in counsel, more disciplined in judgment. When Rickard Karstark defies him, there is no hesitation, no plea from a lover to show mercy. The sword falls, and with it the last illusion that he is fighting as a boy. Lords watch him differently after that day. They see a Stark who will put realm above heart, a lord who will not break word for desire. With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name. His queen hears those cheers and knows instinctively that another woman once stood in the space between them. She does not speak Jane's name. She does not need to. She sees it in the way Robb looks away when healers report from the rear, in the way his jaw tightens when talk turns to the small folks suffering. She fears that if this shadow ever took flesh, it would break the fragile trust they have built. Yet she also accepts it, quietly, as the price of her crown and of the North's safety. This is no simple chessboard. It is a young man crushed between duty and desire, proving to every watching lord that he can bleed for his own decisions. And those scars will matter when the next far greater sacrifice is demanded of House Stark. 8. The North remembers. Differently, the scars do not fade, they harden into story. In the camps and in the cold halls of the North, the tale of Robb Stark's wedding is not told as a love story shattered by arrows and crossbow bolts. It becomes a saga of iron honor, the young wolf who kept the word his father had given, who chose his people over his heart, who stood before a sullen Frey hall and said simply, "I will take her," and in doing so bound the twins to the Stark cause. Bards linger on that moment. They speak of the murmur in the hall, of Walder Frey's sharp, suspicious gaze softening when he realizes there will be no insult, no broken pact, no excuse for treachery. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that Walder might ever feel pride in a Stark, but in this telling, he does. The North remembers that a king's word is a shield, not a chain. From that memory, politics grows more rigid. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Stark legitimacy, already rooted in ancient vows to the old gods, now centers almost fanatically on keeping oaths. When Robb later executes Rickard Karstark, northern lords no longer whisper only about lost spears. They weigh very carefully the fact that this is the same king who married for duty and bled for justice. To doubt him is to doubt the very idea that a lord's promise means anything. In White Harbor, Wyman Manderley watches the Frey girl, turned queen, with calculating eyes. If she proves capable, if she listens at council, sends grain north in winter, and treats Manderley captains with respect, and then House Manderley folds her into the myth, the bridge wife who turned a river crossing into a lifeline for the North. But if she is vain, if she sneers at up-jumped city lords and hoards southern finery, their loyalty to Winterfell curdles into wary obedience. The same is true for Glover and Umber. A shrewd, loyal Frey queen becomes proof that Robb's sacrifice was wise, while a petty, divisive one becomes a living reminder that even a Stark king can chain them to the wrong allies. Young boys drilling in muddy yards do not whisper about a king murdered at a feast. They whisper about a hardened commander who crossed the Twins, shattered Lannisters in the west, and came home with a Frey bride at his side and the banners still flying. Their rightful king is not a ghost at a wedding. He is a presence on the field. Jon feels that too. May in every kneel of every young man who grew up under Robb's banners. Their eyes say it plainly. A king keeps his oaths, even when it breaks him. Then there is a first time for everything, including a realm that expects that as law. So, when new claimants rise, dragon queens from the east, stag kings on painted thrones, lost Targaryen sons with ancient names, how will this North choose? Will they bend to the greatest claim, or only to the one whose word proves as unyielding as Robb Stark's? With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name. Tywin's last gambit, risking open battle. Steel flashes in torchlight instead of candlelight. There is no music, no poisoned cups, no crossbowmen hidden in rafters. In this North, where Robb Stark kept his word and took a Frey bride, and Tywin Lannister finds that the feast he planned in secret has turned into something far more dangerous. An open field, a drawn-up host, and the cold arithmetic of battle. For months he has tried everything else. Raids into the Riverlands to burn out Robb's support. Gold to tempt lesser lordlings from their vows. Letters to Walder Frey that, in another life, would have found a bitter, insulted old man eager for vengeance. Here, those letters meet only polite refusals and careful courtesies, because the young wolf is now the dutiful son-in-law, not the faithless boy king. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. With the twins secured, supply wagons roll steadily down from the north. Salted meats, fresh horses, spare mail. And not even small folk levies trickle through those stone towers that once felt like a noose and now feel like a shield. Robb rides the river roads with confidence, his scouts slipping through alder and willow, mapping every ford, every hill, every stretch of bog that can swallow a night in his proud destrier hole. He studies the land as carefully as he once studied his father's face in the great hall. He cannot match the Lannisters coin for coin, but on the right ground, he does not need to. A bend in the Red Fork where the banks rise steep, a patch of soft earth masked by reeds, a narrow causeway between two low ridges. Each becomes a weapon in his hands. Tywin's numbers matter less if half his strength must advance in columns, squeezed and staggered, while northern spears wait in the mist. Tywin sees it as clearly as Robb. The slow war is bleeding him white. Every burned village in the Riverlands stains his name. Every month of stalemate makes the lion's roar sound a little more hollow in court. He hates this. He hates uncertainty. Hates that one boy with a wolf's head for a banner has forced him to count not only dragons in his vaults, but sons on his family tree. Yet here he is, riding the line between pride and terror. One field, one throw of the dice for the future of his house. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Tywin Lannister, of all men, choosing risk over patience. So he offers battle, or perhaps cornered by bread and steel and stubborn river lords, he grudgingly accepts it. Lines form, standards lift. The air hums with that terrible stillness before men start killing each other for a crown that, to Robb and Jon, has always felt like both a duty and a curse. What happens next? A bloody clash that leaves both sides staggering back to their camps, banners torn but still flying. A narrow Lannister victory where Robb is wounded, his guard cut down around him, yet he escapes into the river mists with gray wind at his side, the legend of the wolf that will not die, only growing. Or does the North and River host break the lions outright, smashing their center on chosen ground, shattering not just Tywin's army, but the illusion that the Lannisters cannot lose? Then there is a first time for everything. In this timeline, Tywin must fight the war he feared most. One where honor and swords, not treachery and songs, decide kings. But as the horns sound and riders take their places, another truth hangs over both camps like a storm cloud. Win or lose. This field will not end the war. Someone else is still coming for the throne. And when word of this battle reaches Jon, far to the north, how will he answer it? If Robb wins, a king in the north who actually survives, the field does not end the war, and in this timeline, it does not end Robb Stark either. When the trumpets fade and the carrion crows descend, word carries south and east. The young wolf has broken Tywin's main host, yet he does not march on King's Landing. He marches on terms. Robb stands in a smoky tent, the sounds of the wounded seeping through the canvas as his lords argue over the map. Take the capital, free the realm, finish the Lannisters. But he can feel his father's shadow at his shoulder. Here's again the quiet warnings in that last letter about overreach, about the price of every life spent. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Victory does not mean ruin for his people. It means leverage, so the peace is hammered out on blood-stained parchment. The Iron Throne, still under Joffrey, or perhaps Tommen, if court intrigue turns sharper than any sword, must recognize an independent North and Riverlands, with Robb as king. Hostages are exchanged, a Lannister boy at Winterfell, a Stark or Tully youth in King's Landing as surety. Trade and passage remain, but oaths of fealty do not. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Yet, Tywin is forced to swallow the terms, his armies shattered, his gold tied up in ransoms, his pride the only thing he can still brandish. In Winterfell's great hall, the change is visible in stone and flesh. A Frey queen sits at Robb's side, her expression careful, her hands steady on the arms of the chair that once held his father. Her kin fill the benches. Frey uncles granted new keeps along the Green Fork. Cadet branches settled in half-ruined Riverland towers under northern protection. The twins are no longer a mere crossing. They are the southern gate of a two-kingdom realm, but every elevation draws a shadow. Karstark men mutter that Freys, not ancient houses of the north, now whisper closest to the king. River lords grumble that Walder Frey has leapt over them all. Robb feels it in every council. Each word to please one lord risks cutting another. Then there is a first time for everything. A Stark king must learn to rule through rivals, not only through friends. Beyond his marriage bed and council chamber, his priorities harden. He must secure succession with his Frey wife. Burke rebuild the burned farmsteads of the Trident and keep the peace between storm-tossed river lords and flinty Northmen who think the Freys have taken too much, too fast. The Iron Throne, reduced to the Crownlands, Westerlands, and a wary reach, limps on. Tywin nurses his grudges like old wounds. The Tyrells quietly wonder if tying their fortunes to a maimed throne was wise, and every raven from the south carries some new rumor of plots. And over all of this, silent and patient, greater storms gather. Reports of dead men walking drift to Robb's court, like half-believed tales. Across the sea, word of dragons reaches even the Dreadfort. When ice presses from the far north and fire sails from the east, how will a living, ruling Robb Stark answer? Which threat does a young king face first? The dead in the snow? Or the living Targaryen who may yet claim all crowns as her due? If Robb loses, a different kind of tragedy. Yet in another path, those same storms break differently. The Red Wedding never comes. Walder Frey never opens his doors to song and slaughter. And still, Robb Stark may lose everything. The twins remain his bridge, his shield, and his noose. With a Frey queen by his side and a son in her arms, Robb presses deeper into the Westerlands, burning Lannister fields and seizing keeps. But the war turns slow and heavy. Tywin yields ground, not out of fear, but calculation, drawing the young wolf farther from the north, farther from Winterfell, and farther from any hope of easy supply. Grain from the neck arrives late, if at all. The Riverlords' levies grow thin, their own lands harried by Gregor Clegane and Lannister riders. The Reach joins the war in full, and with Mace Tyrell's banners swelling the Lannister host, the numbers tilt. Robb feels it in every council. He has the twins, yes, but the Green Fort can only carry so much food, so many men, so many desperate letters from home. In his tent one night, as snow begins to fall even this far south, Robb studies a map pocked with wine stains and knife marks. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Victory by swift hammer blow is gone. Now it is a war of attrition, and the Lannisters and Tyrells have deeper coffers, fuller granaries, and fewer scruples about burning the Riverlands to starve him out. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. The idea that honoring his Frey pact would not save him only changed the manner of his defeat. Yet the logic is merciless. No Red Wedding. Oh, no feast of murder, but also no sudden end to the conflict. Instead, a long grinding down, each skirmish won by Robb, costing men he cannot replace. Each loss magnified by the North's distance and the sea between him and any southern ally. The end comes not in a hall with music, but on a field of mud and ash. Outside the ruins of a minor Westerlands hold fast, Robb's tired host meets the full weight of Lannister and Tyrell's spears. His horse is killed beneath him. He rises, sword in hand, fighting beside the Great Joan and the Blackfish until the shield wall buckles. Arrows darken the sky. Trumpets sound. The young wolf is ringed by gold and green. Some say he is captured, offered life, in exchange for bending the knee and surrendering Jon's claim. Others swear he dies with gray wind howling over his body, Lannister banners spattered red. Then there is a first time for everything. A Stark king falls in open battle, not by treachery, but by the simple, brutal arithmetic of war. His Frey queen flees in the chaos, a babe clutched to her breast, racing for the twins under guard. In another telling, she is spirited north by Blackfish and small folk loyal to the wolf, slipping from village to village until Winterfell's gates close behind her. Either way, she becomes something Westeros has rarely seen, a living banner of a lost cause, half Frey, half Stark. Her child a quiet reminder that the young wolf once howled. The emotional wound this carves is different from the one we know. There is no poison cup, no music turning to screams, no sense that the sacred laws of guest right have been shattered beyond repair. Instead, the North receives word that their king has fallen, as kings have fallen for thousands of years, sword in hand, outnumbered, outsupplied, but unbent. The grief is no less, yet it carries a strange, bitter pride. They were beaten, the lords tell themselves, but not betrayed. For House Frey, the aftermath is a trap without easy exits. They are now indelibly tied to a failed rebellion, their lord's grandsons bearing both Trout and Direwolf in their veins. The Lannisters and Tyrells cannot simply sweep them aside. They still hold the only great crossing of the Green Fork, and their blood now mingles with the line that once wore a crown in the north. To punish them too harshly risks stirring northern vengeance. To trust them fully is folly. So, the Freys dance. Walder sends hostages to King's Landing, offers his halls for royal envoys, and swears again and again that he urged Robb to yield. Yet, in the quiet corners of the twins, some younger Freys whisper a different story to one another, and to the half-Stark child playing in their corridors, that once a wolf chose them and they failed to keep him. Here lies the cruel twist. By keeping his word, Robb avoids the most infamous betrayal in Westerosi memory, but not the ruin that waits beyond it. Honor does not save his crown. It merely changes the song. Instead of a massacre in a hall, we have a noble last stand on a battlefield. Instead of a sudden knife in the dark, a slow strangling by hunger and numbers. The North is still leaderless, the Riverlands still broken, and Jon, if word of this reaches him, must still reckon with a realm in pieces. What then is the true cost of honor? Is it better to die cleanly under the open sky, your enemies' blades before you, or to live long enough to watch every promise you made drag your people toward defeat? As the next chapter of this tale unfolds, and new powers rise from east and far north alike, that question will haunt every choice the remaining Starks make. A Stark Frey, heir the child who bridges two worlds. Yet for all those questions about honor and its cost, one quiet truth waits in the wings of this new Stark Frey order. Sooner or later, there will be a child. When Robb takes his Frey bride to wife in the drafty halls of the twins, most lords see only the moment, the banners, the oaths, the old man at the high table, thin mouth twisted in a rare, brittle smile. Few of them stop to imagine the sound of a babe crying in Winterfell's solar 2 winters later. All or the way that sound will echo from the green fork to the neck. Then there is a first time for everything. Word spreads quickly. A Stark heir is born, they say in the north. Lord Walder's Get sits the future high seat of Winterfell, they whisper in the Riverlands. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Yet in this timeline, it is simply the truth of the realm. The Karstarks and Umbers drink to the child, as they would to any wolf pup. At the twins, grizzled Frey sons who have never seen snow boast that their blood will rule beyond the neck. Legally, it is simple. Feudally, it changes everything. As Robb's first trueborn, this son or daughter carries the clear claim to Winterfell, to the grey stone and the old god's weirwood. But through their mother, they are also bound, by blood and expectation, to the crossing that holds the Riverlands together. One day this heir might not only be Lord or Lady of Winterfell, but the quiet power behind whichever Frey commands the twins, able to call spears from both banks of the Green Fork. Rivals see the danger at once. To House Tully, still smarting from being outmaneuvered by Freys in their own river, this child is a living threat to their primacy. To the Lannisters, locked in a grinding war with the North, the notion of a single figure who can marshal northern levies and Frey tolls alike is intolerable. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The heir becomes a prize for marriage, a pawn for hostage-taking, and, in darker whispers, a target whose death could shatter the fragile bridge between Wolf and Trout and Twin Towers. And what of the child themselves? They grow with one foot in each world. In Winterfell's yard, they hear tales of their father, the young wolf, and of Jon, the king who rose from bastard snow. At the twins, they are weighed like coin, measured by which Frey cousin they favor and how they might serve the house's fortunes. Northern bluntness clashes with Frey calculation inside a single heart. Are they a Stark with a Frey mother, or a Frey wrapped in a Stark cloak? As Robb looks at this child across a crowded hall, he feels both hope and dread. This heir could be the glue that binds North and River for a generation, or the spark that sets every old grudge alight the moment he falls. The war against the Lannisters will end one day, one way or another. When it does, all of Westeros will be watching to see whether this bridge child holds under the weight of peace, or breaks. With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name, but in the quiet after, the future belongs to the child who did not choose any of this. Riverrun's shadow. Tully, resentment and adaptation. The hall at Riverrun feels smaller when the war songs fade. Edmure sits beneath the leaping trout, listening to distant word of the Frey wolf maid who now shares Robb's bed. In the north and at the twins, they are already whispering about the child that might come, a boy or girl who would be half Stark, half Frey, with the bridge and the north bound into one body. He realizes, with a dull, heavy clarity, what that means for him. His own heir, if he ever sires one, will not be the first riverborn cousin of a Stark king in the north. That honor will belong to a Frey. Edmure tries to laugh it off, but the sound dies in his throat. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The songs will not say Edmure Tully held the line at River Run. They will say, Walder Frey's blood now runs beside the dire wolf. Brynden Blackfish watches his nephew's disquiet with the cool eye of a man who has buried too many dreams. He despises Walder's pretensions, the way the old lord now speaks of his claim to stand beside great houses as an equal. Yet, Brynden cannot deny the truth. The bridge held, the crossing was won, and Robb kept his letter-sworn vow. That single choice has done more to shield the Riverlands from Lannisters and betrayal than any number of gallant charges. He walks the battlements and counts banners. More and more, he sees small river lords sending sons and daughters not to River Run, but to the Twins, all to serve the new queen of the North. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, he thinks, remembering the first word that Robb would actually wed a Frey. But madness or not, the current is shifting. River Run is still the old heart. The Twins are becoming the new pulse. For Catelyn, the wound cuts deeper than heraldry. She stands between banners, the trout of her father's house, the dire wolf of her son, and now the pale blue of Frey towers linked to them both. She knows this marriage keeps Robb alive, keeps Jon's fragile coalition from fraying, keeps the Lannisters from ever luring Walder into Tywin's shadow. Yet each time she hears some young lord speak of the Frey Queen, something tightens in her chest. Her father's line is thinning, her son's in-laws are swelling. Then there is a first time for everything, she tells herself, and even for House Tully to stand slightly behind another's glory. Whispers spread through the lesser halls. House Hay sending gifts to the Twins, House Charlton offering men for Frey garrisons, minor knights begging a place in the Queen's household. Bit by bit, the center of gravity tilts. When ravens fly, more of them bear the Twins' seal than River Run's. Brynden sees it and says nothing. Edmure sees it and cannot sleep. Catelyn sees it and prays that when the war against the Lannisters is finally told, the songs will still remember the trout as the direwolf's true partner, not the towers that rose late. But who decides which sigil lives in memory, the lord who fought or the blood that endures? And when the next generation stands in some new great hall, raising swords to cheer a different king's name, will they speak first of Tully, Wade, or Frey, the Ironborn and the Twins, a new target on the map? The songs those children hear will not just speak of trout and towers. They will speak of a bridge that became a throne of its own, and of all the eyes that turned toward it once Robb bound House Stark to House Frey. Far to the west, on a hard, salt-stung rock, another lord listens as word of this reaches Pike. Balon Greyjoy remembers his first rebellion, remembers the smoking ruins of his sons and his claim, and he hears that the north now flows south through a single crossing held by a proud old man and the boy they call the Young Wolf. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Why bleed longships against scattered fishing villages when one stroke at the Twins could choke the north itself? In canon, Balon sent his raiders to seize Deepwood Motte and Winterfell, trusting Theon to turn on his foster father and burn the very godswood where Jon once prayed. Here, the calculus shifts. A fortified, Frey-reinforced Twins is not merely another castle, it is a hinge on which Robb's whole war against the Lannisters turns. To strike there is to strike at the River Lords and the North in one blow, to humiliate both Stark and Frey in the same night. Euron would see more than a bridge. He would see spectacle. Victarion would see a prize. Imagine the silence slipping up the Green Fork under cover of fog, or a great Ironborn host landing on the western banks, while Frey banners still flap complacently in the wind. Capture the crossing, and every wagon of grain bound for Winterfell stops. Every letter, every raven, every promise Robb made to his bannermen becomes a hollow word. Yet the Twins in this timeline is no half-manned backwater. Walder Frey has his pride appeased, his brood intermarried, his towers thick with spears. Robb, warned by his father's fate and Catelyn's grief, would insist on Stark men garrisoned there as well, northern captains sharing command with Frey heirs. It could be enough to throw back a swift Ironborn raid. Or it could turn the Twins into the site of a brutal siege, with longships on the river and rams at the gate, testing whether this new alliance holds when the first tower falls. And Theon? In canon, he is sent back to Pike as an envoy, then returns as a traitor. Here, Robb might hesitate. Does he trust his foster brother with the very bridge that anchors his war? Or send him to Winterfell to guard the home Jon left behind? The wrong choice could decide not just one boy's soul, but the fate of the entire North. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. That one marriage at the Twins might redirect the ambitions of men as distant as Balon or even Doran Martell. Then there is a first time for everything. Robb's vow does not only deny Tywin his red wedding, it redraws the map in every ambitious mind from the Iron Islands to Dorne, and the next move on that map may not come from the Lannisters at all. With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name, but somewhere beyond their sight, other kings are already sharpening theirs. The Brotherhood without banners, allies or rivals, or the swords are still raised in Robb's hall when the Riverlands begin to whisper of other banners in the trees. While the Freys open their gates and wagons to their young Stark lord, another force is already moving through the hedgerows and burned villages. The Brotherhood without banners, sworn not to any king, but to a different kind of justice. In the half-ruined septs and ash-choked fields, their mission is simple and impossibly bold. They defend the small folk who have no moisture to write their grief, Harry Lannister foraging parties, hang raiders in the name of a vanished king's last command. They reject the old order where a lord's word is law and a peasant's body is coin. To the broken and dispossessed, Beric Dondarrion is more than a hedge knight with a flaming sword. You see, he is proof that the gods have not entirely turned their faces away. Yet, as Robb's Frey-supported campaign tightens around the Lannisters, the ground beneath the Brotherhood shifts. With the Twins secured and supply lines flowing, Robb can keep real garrisons in the Riverlands, not just passing hosts. His riders can answer cries for help faster. His banners can be seen from more village wells. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The very space in which the Brotherhood grew, those abandoned lawless pockets, begins to shrink. Word of these northern victories reaches even the Hollow Hills. Around Beric's campfires, Thoros of Myr hears the tales. The young wolf honoring his oath, the Freys swelling his strength, Lannister outriders found hanging from trees before they ever reach a hamlet. Now, it sounded like madness when I first read it too. Thoros might murmur over watered wine, that a highborn king could remember the lowborn, while the war still rages. Do they now fight the same enemy, or for the same people? When scouts report Stark outriders near their hidden caves, the question ceases to be abstract. In one possible meeting, Beric rides out under a truce banner to face Robb's commanders, perhaps the Blackfish, perhaps a Mallister lord who still remembers the trident. They speak of raids, of timing, of striking Lannister columns from both sides. On parchment, coordination is easy. In the saddle, it is harder. Can a king's men truly trust outlaws who hang knights without trial? Can men who have watched lords fail the Riverlands believe that this young Stark is different? Here, Catelyn's survival becomes a quiet fulcrum. In canon, grief twists her into Lady Stoneheart, a vengeful specter who bends the Brotherhood toward pure retribution. In this altered war, a living Catelyn might instead meet them as her father's daughter and as the mother of their king. She has walked among burned villages, heard the small folk curse both lion and trout. Faced with Beric's broken body and Thoros's weary faith, she could become not a ghost of vengeance, but a bridge, urging Robb to see that a crown's justice means little if the poorest never feel it. If Robb's banner truly holds strong across the Riverlands, the small folks' need for the Brotherhood changes shape. Perhaps fewer villages starve in silence, fewer children vanish on the roads. Yet war's chaos does not vanish. It only moves. There will still be deserters, brutalized prisoners, lords who take more than their due. The Brotherhood might find itself less the only shield and more a shadow court of last resort, watching the king as much as his enemies. And as darker powers stir in the far north, the question of who truly protects the realm's most fragile souls will only grow sharper. King's Landing's spin machine, smearing the Frey wolf. Yet while broken men whisper in forests and outlaws weigh oaths in the dark, another war sharpens its knives in the sunlight of King's Landing, not with steel, with stories. In the capital, the Lannisters do not simply fight Robb in the field, they seize his very name. Cersei understands that banners burn, but songs endure, and she moves to make certain that every song of the so-called King in the North drips with poison. Word is sent to the singers, the mummers. It's the cheap broadsheet printers who haunt Flea Bottom. The tale is simple. Robb Stark is no noble rebel. He is a traitor, a usurper, a boy who raised his sword against his rightful king and then sold the North to river merchants at a toll bridge. Tywin's hand is colder, but no less deliberate. He summons septons to the Red Keep, men who owe their vestments to Lannister gold, and guides their sermons with quiet suggestions. From the pulpits of the city's septs, the faithful hear that Robb's claim is built on pride, not truth, that his father's death was the just end of a man who plotted against his king and poisoned the realm with lies. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. To question Joffrey is to stand with treason. The Frey girl becomes the crown's easiest target. In whispered court jests and cruel tavern songs, she is called the Toll Keeper's Queen, a grasping bridge wench who snared a wolf with her father's gold. Her name is twisted into a punchline, her house dismissed as up-jumped ferrymen who sell passage like whores sell comfort. Robb hears none of it directly, but the stories are crafted for northern ears as much as southern ones. The message is clear. The king in the north has chained his line to mud and river silt. Cersei leans into the old northern pride she has heard of from her father. Broadsheets describe the phrase as low-born in all but name, men who bought their lordship with coin instead of earning it with blood. Septon sermons hint that the match is unseemly, that a true son of Winterfell should have chosen a daughter of ancient stock. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Yet the Lannisters know that if Robb begins to doubt his own marriage, his bannermen will doubt him. Merchants carry these tales north, along with salt fish and Dornish wine. Captured Lannister soldiers repeat them in northern camps, sometimes with a flinch, sometimes with a smirk. Around Karstark fires and in the Great John's loud feasts, men grumble that a Stark should not bow his head to a toll keeper. Old suspicions of Frey cowardice deepen. The Frey Queen walks through Robb's hall with her head high, but she can feel the glances. Every laugh that stops when she enters. Every lord who says "my king" to Robb, and only "lady" to her. Then there is a first time for everything. War without a single sword drawn in anger, yet still deadly. For each skirmish Robb wins, the crown answers with another story, another song. Another carefully placed rumor that the North is ruled now by river merchants and bridge lords instead of true wolves. In Westeros, wars are fought with words as much as swords, and this Frey-Stark union has given the Lannisters a new, living target. The only question is which will break first, the lies in the south or the fragile trust in Robb's own hall. The faith of the Seven and the old gods, a divided court. Those southern whispers about river merchants ruling the north do not stay whispers for long. They arrive at Winterfell wearing blue and silver cloaks, carrying Septon's bells and carved images of the Seven, trailing behind Robb and his new Frey bride like a second unseen host. The girl he chose at the Twins would almost certainly have been raised with the faith of the Seven. Her father and brothers swear by the warrior before battle. Her mother lights candles to the mother and the crone, and every important word in her life has been spoken beneath painted faces in a crowded sept. Now she rides under the gray sky of the north and sees, at the heart of Robb's ancestral home, not a sept at all, but a pale, bleeding tree staring back at her in utter silence. Robb notices the way she shivers when they first pass the heart tree, not from cold, from unfamiliarity. He was raised to stand quiet in that god's wood, to feel his father's presence in the rustling leaves, to remember that the old gods watch without altar or idol. She was raised to kneel on stone floors, to confess aloud so a man in robes could answer. Two different kinds of faith, two different kinds of fear. When word spreads that the Frey Queen wishes a small sept within Winterfell's walls, the reaction is not mild. Some northern lords shrug, remembering Catelyn's own faith and the tiny sept Ned allowed her. Others bristle, seeing not a wife's comfort, but a southern beachhead. A septon preaching in the shadow of the heart tree feels to them like a challenge, not a courtesy. Outside the castle, it is worse. Small folk in the villages mutter that the new queen prays to strange gods who need statues to hear her. Old women who kept the stories of the first men alive through winter after winter spit when they hear bells, saying no true Northman needs 7 faces when one old heart tree will do. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. It means Robb's marriage is not only counted in swords and bridges, but in prayers and ghosts. Robb finds himself caught in the same quiet war his father once fought in his own hall. Ned had compromised, children split between gods, a wife sept beside a husband's godswood. Robb remembers that, remembers his father's measured voice explaining why Sansa followed the Seven while he took Bran to the Heart Tree. Now his Frey bride asks, gently but firmly, that their first son be crowned before the Seven, that their daughters wear the mother's star. The request is simple. The weight behind it is not. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. A Stark king of the North, bound to river lords, letting Septons plant roots in Winterfell as if it were Old Town. Yet history in Westeros is written by such compromises. A northern realm that can speak both to the old gods and the Seven might forge alliances the Lannisters never see coming. A realm that cannot reconcile those prayers might crack from the inside before any Lannister sword touches the wall. Then there is a first time for everything. Perhaps this is the first time the North truly becomes a bridge between worlds instead of a wall against them. Or perhaps Tywin's surviving agents and Robb's own enemies among the Northern Lords learn to whisper a new kind of poison, that their young king has traded not only his bride, but the very soul of Winterfell. And once that doubt takes root, no Septon's blessing and no Heart Tree's silence will be enough to uproot it. Long game. A Frey queen facing winter. So, what does it look like when that poison meets snow? When the whispers about the Frey bride collide with the first true northern winter in a generation, the shape of this marriage stops being a courtly scandal and becomes a question of survival. The first snows come early. The Frey girl, now queen in all but name when Robb rides south, learns very quickly that the North does not care who her father is, only whether she can keep them alive. She rides out from Winterfell wrapped in furs that feel too heavy, on a horse that steams in the cold, watching small folk drag in the last of a meager harvest. The air bites. The silence bites harder. In the great hall, the ladies of the North study her. Lady Mage Mormont, stout and scarred, speaks for many when she says, "Winter is not a song, my lady. It is work." The Frey queen listens. That, more than any fine word, is what begins to matter. And she sits with old stewards over cracked ledgers, learning which fields flood first, which villages starve first, which lords hoard. Respect does not come easily. Some never give it. Karstark men mutter that a Frey will sell Winterfell for a bridge. The Greyjohn laughs more softly than he once did. But when she rides through a whiteout to inspect failing granaries at Torrens Square, when she orders her own household to eat barley so the children in the Wolfswood can keep their oats, the murmur changes. Slowly, uneasily. Then there is a first time for everything. Robb's letters from the front grow shorter as the war grinds on. Each one carries the same unspoken command, hold the North. She answers with hard numbers, not pretty phrases. How many bushels remain? How many mouths? How many days? She bargains with her Riverlands kin for grain, reminding Lord Walder that if Winterfell falls hungry, his bridge will stand over empty banks. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, the Maester thinks, watching a Frey girl argue down a northern Castellan over rationing. But the truth is simple. Every loaf she miscounts kills someone she will never see. She signs orders that close roads, that forbid feasts, that seize stores from a petty lord who lied. Mercy becomes a luxury she can no longer afford. When her first child is born in a storm, the whole castle holds its breath. The babe's fist curls around her finger. And in that moment, the Frey Queen's priorities shift. Prestige, her father's favor, and even Robb's distant glory as king in the south, all of it bends around a single, terrifying need, that this child inherit a realm still standing when the snows melt. And over all of it, a darker question gathers like clouds beyond the wall. When word finally comes of dead men walking, of blue eyes in the forests beyond the night's watch, will the North truly rally behind a queen with Frey blood? Or, at the very edge of the world, will old hatreds wake as well, and turn inward just as the real enemy steps out of the storm? Daenerys and the Wolf Frey. North. Fire meets a different ice. The storm that finally crosses the narrow sea does not find the same Westeros. By the time Daenerys Targaryen's sails cut through the narrow sea, word of dragons has already flown faster than any raven. Yet when she looks west, and she does not see one realm and one iron throne, she sees a broken crown, a defiant north, and a young king at Winterfell whose banners bear both the direwolf and the twin towers of House Frey. Her path there is much the same. She walks the red streets of Meereen, learns the cost of mercy and fire, hatches her dragons in the shadow of her husband's pyre. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. 3 living dragons in a world that had forgotten even their bones. But if this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Because when her fleet finally leaves Slaver's Bay, the raven she follows is not from Varys alone. It carries word that the North and Riverlands have already crowned their own, and bled to make that word real. In Winterfell's great hall, Robb sits beneath the carved direwolves, all listening as reports drift up from White Harbor and the Fingers. A Targaryen queen with dragons. Essosi soldiers. Talk of a claim reaching back to Aegon the Conqueror himself. Robb's whole body goes rigid as he hears it laid out. Another Southern king. Another war. The North remembers what it cost to tear free from the Lannisters and the Iron Throne. Fathers buried in cold crypts, sons left on the Green Fork, Karstark men scattered in nameless graves. They remember the letter that named Joffrey a bastard and shattered any illusion of Southern honor. Now, a silver-haired queen speaks of restoring what his father helped pull down. To many lords, it sounds like a noose wrapped in silk, yet strategy whispers where pride roars. Dragons melt steel, dragons shatter walls, and somewhere beyond the wall, dead men march. Yet if Daenerys offers fire against that darkness, can Robb refuse her out of hand? Or does he weigh her claim, her truth, against the oaths he has sworn to his own people? Here, the Frey marriage cuts 2 ways. Walder's brood now has a queen of their own in the north, and they know what it is to be scorned by great lords. Some will look at Daenerys and see only another Southron king in a dress, ready to cast them aside once her dragons are fed. Others will see a ladder, a marriage between a Stark Frey heir and a Targaryen, wolf and tower and dragon bound in one child, is the sort of thought that keeps old men like Walder Frey awake at night, smiling in the dark. Then, there is a first time for everything. A dragon queen seeking not to rule the north, but to stand beside its king. Or a northern court that dares to ask, will you wed our heir and make your fire part of our winter, or will you try to burn us as well? And as Daenerys' fleet nears Westeros, as her dragons scream over gray waves, one last question hangs between Winterfell and the sea like breath in cold air. When dragonfire finally meets this altered ice, will they forge a single blade against the dead, or shatter into warring shards all over again? Stannis, the North, and competing kings. Stannis Baratheon hears those same whispers on Dragonstone long before dragon wings shadow the narrow sea. While Jon and Daenerys move toward the coast, while Robb stands in Winterfell with a Frey bride at his side, another claim hardens like iron in the cold. Stannis' belief that he alone is the rightful king. In the canon we know, his path is stark and narrow. He learns the truth of Joffrey's birth from Ned's letter, stakes his entire life on that harsh, legal truth, and declares his claim with fire and sword. He burns idols, executes traitors, loses at the Blackwater, and then, stripped of pride and power, marches north to the Wall to fight the true enemy. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. A man who cares so much for law, abandoning his throne to save snow and stone at the end of the world. In this altered north, when word reaches him that Robb has been crowned king in the north and king of the Trident, Stannis' jaw clenches. Robb's banners fly over the Twins, over River Run, over Moat Cailin. The Frey crossing is his artery of war, not a trap. Stannis studies the reports in grim silence, in seeing not a boy with a wolf banner, but a rival king who has broken from the realm his father once swore to. To Stannis, that is treason. It cannot be anything else. The law is the law, and the 7 kingdoms are meant to be one. Yet even he must weigh the order of his enemies. The Lannisters who murdered his brother, the usurping boy king in King's Landing, the shadows gathering in the far north that Melisandre names in every whispered prayer. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. He cannot fight all 3 at once. So the cold, rigid mind begins to bend in a way it never did before. What if, instead of demanding Robb's submission as a rebellious vassal, he offers recognition? King in the north, under the king on the Iron Throne. A vassal-king structure not seen since the days before Aegon's conquest. It has never been done in living memory. Then there is a first time for everything. Robb listens in the Great Hall as a raven's letter from Stannis is read aloud. Father's name. Joffrey's bastardy. The demand that all true men rally to the one lawful king. But there is also a line that did not exist in the world we know. An offer to confirm Robb's northern crown and his lordship over the River Lords, so long as he bends the knee and brings his strength against the Lannisters, and, in time, against the darkness beyond the wall. The Frey Queen's eyes narrow as the words are spoken. To her kin at the Twins, Stannis is both threat and opportunity. If Robb falters, they can whisper of another king, one whose justice might raise or ruin Frey fortunes with a single decree. If Robb triumphs, aligning with Stannis might check Lannister vengeance and secure their new status forever. Here, the deeper clash sharpens. Stannis stands on law, on parchment, on the bare, brutal truth Ned once died for. Robb stands on oaths freely given, on victories won, on the memory of a father who chose honor over safety. His crown is made of blood and word and winter loyalty. Stannis's is forged from ink and fire. The Frey alliance knots these threads together. Can a king by law and a king by love share the realm? Or must one claim devour the other when the dead finally come south? The North versus the Crown. Independence or integration. The question beneath all the banners and battle songs is colder than any northern wind. What does this Stark Frey North grow into once the war drums fall silent? Robb stands between two worlds every time he looks at his young Frey Queen. Her Riverland's blood is a bridge and a chain. From this point, 3 roads stretch before the realm. A hard, lonely crown of full independence. A looser, negotiated place within a wider confederation. Or a slow, subtle slide back into bending the knee when some southern king grows strong again. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Independence is not just a word shouted in a crowded hall. It is ships, grain, steel, and coin. Robb has seen the ledgers. He knows the North can feed itself in good years, but in cruel winters it leans on southern grain and river harvests. The Twins, now bound to him by marriage instead of mere oath, become the artery through which that lifeblood must flow. Cut that, and a free North could starve on its own pride. Yet the very same bridge that feeds them also tugs them south. The Freys are not children of the Weirwoods. They are river lords, quarrelsome, ambitious, always listening for word from King's Landing or Casterly Rock. Walder's brood pulls at the fabric of Robb's council, whispering of tolls, trade pacts, and chances to profit from peace with whatever crown rises after the Lannisters' fall. It sounded like madness when I first read it, too. A Stark king of the North, forever haggling over tariffs at the Twins. In that vision, the second path takes shape. A realm where Jon rules the South and Robb the North, or where some later compromise forges a looser union. The Stark Frey children grow up riding from Winterfell to the Twins as easily as to White Harbor. For them, the Trident is not an enemy's river. It is their mother's home. The old grief over Ned's death, over Lannister treachery, becomes a story their father tells by the fire, not a wound they felt themselves. Distance dulls the blade. Then there is a first time for everything. Perhaps a grandson, raised half in the Riverlands and half in the snows, looks at Jon's dragons and Dorne's oranges and wonders what true separation is even for. Does he see a foreign king or an elder cousin whose claim once saved their house? The third road is the quietest and most dangerous. Not a sudden surrender, but a series of small, reasonable concessions. Shared coinage for easier trade through the Twins. Joint patrols on the neck. A seat for a southern envoy in Winterfell. Only to keep the peace. Each step defensible, each step binding. This becomes the great constitutional question of this altered Westeros. Did Robb's Frey marriage forge a North that can truly stand alone on winter grain and stubborn honor, or a realm forever negotiating its place between Weirwood and Green Fork, between a father's vengeance and a grandson's convenience? And when the dead finally come, which answer keeps his people alive? Walder's legacy. Freys in the age after Robb. The answer to that question will not be settled in Robb's lifetime. It waits for another man's death. When Walder Frey finally dies, it is not with crossbows hidden in the rafters or Lannister gold in his lap. It is in a bed at the Twins, sour and suspicious to the last, surrounded by sons and grandsons who smell blood in the water. The old lord's word has held them in a loose, resentful orbit for decades. The moment it is gone, every slight, every passed-over son, every barren marriage explodes into the open. Yet this chaos is not the chaos of canon. There is a queen at Winterfell now, Walder's own daughter, gray-eyed and quiet, who has learned to speak with a northern stillness that unnerves her Frey kin. There are royal grandchildren in the snow, half Stark, half Frey, who carry the memory of a father that rode south as a boy and returned as a king's right hand. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Robb hears the first reports in the Great Hall, the letter from the Twins crackling in his hand. Walder dead. Black Walder railing that he should have been named heir. Rymon's line clinging to the main seat. Walder Rivers and other bastards whispering that a grandson of a king has a stronger claim than any of them. Robb feels the pull at once. He could send a single rider, a single name, and end this struggle in a breath. Or he could let them bleed. Jon, when he hears, is colder. The North needs the bridge, not the man, he reminds Robb. A fractured House Frey is weaker, more pliable, more desperate to please the White Dragon on the Iron Throne and the Wolf Lord in Winterfell. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, Robb thinks, remembering his father's last letter and the impossible truth it carried. But he has learned that the mad choice is sometimes the only safe one. So the Stark Frey heir becomes a knife held by the crown. When Frey quarrels threaten to spill over into the Riverlands, Jon sends word that any lord who harms the Queen's kin will answer to the king. When the infighting grows too loud, Robb quietly favors the least ambitious cousin, the one who will hold the Twins but never dream of Riverrun. Then there is a first time for everything, a Frey who keeps his head down. History, though, is not written in those quiet choices. Maesters in Old Town debate Walder's legacy for generations. In one set of books, in another world, he is the butcher of the Red Wedding, the lord who sold his honor for Lannister coin. In this world, the ink runs differently. Some call him the man whose bridge saved a northern king, whose daughter stood beside a Stark and gave the realm heirs that bound river and north as tightly as any chain. Yet the stain never fully fades. Old words linger. Upstart, turncloak, Frey. Even with a queenly daughter and royal grandchildren, the great houses remember every late levy, every grasping marriage demand. The Twins may host princes and princesses, but at feasts in Highgarden and Sunspear, lords still murmur that a Frey is a Frey, and trust is a bridge you cross with a hand on your sword. And that is the final irony. The man who might have been cursed for a wedding of blood is instead remembered, if he is remembered at all, for a wedding that saved a wolf from the noose and set a dragon on the throne. But as winter deepens and strange reports begin to drift down from the wall, another question rises in the cold. When the dead come south, will any bridge, any name, be enough? Small folk stories. How one marriage changes a million lives. For the High Lords, Robb's marriage to a Frey girl is a matter of banners and treaties. For the people who live in the Twin Shadow, it is something far simpler. And it is the difference between a bridge that stays open and a bridge that becomes a grave. Along the Green Fork, the war still comes. Riders thunder past plowmen, levy men vanish from their fields, and sometimes a barn is requisitioned and never seen again. Yet the Twins do not close. No toll of corpses is demanded for passage, only coin and grain and the muttered curses of carters. Because the crossing remains a functioning hub, barges still creep up and down the river, and long trains of ox carts grind over the causeways with salt fish from White Harbor, barley from the north, and wine casks bound for the rear camps. In a village 3 miles from the eastern tower, an old woman remembers the last winter, when the Lannisters burned her cousin's mill on the Red Fork. This year, the flames are farther away. The Frey men-at-arms patrol the roads more often, half out of duty to their new Stark good brother, half from fear of his anger. Fewer raiders slip through, fewer children vanish in the night. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. But stability is a knife with 2 edges. Because Robb keeps the Freys loyal and the bridge secure, his host can stay in the field longer. Campaigns stretch into seasons. Villages far to the south in the Riverlands, where the Lannisters and their allies try to break his supply lines, suffer for it. A hamlet spared this year because the grain wagons roll safely over the Twins may burn next year when a frustrated lord rides deeper, seeking something, anything, to starve the Wolf King. In the inns along the river, the small folk argue in low voices about their Frey queen. Some call her the Lady of the Bridge, though few have seen her face. To a hedge witch near Fairmarket, she is a blessing. Her cousin in Frey livery chased off bandits and left a silver stag. To a tanner west of the Green Fork, she is a curse. His son was beaten senseless by those same cousins for failing to bow low enough. Protection and exploitation wear the same colors. The name Frey tastes different on every tongue, and the name Stark is judged beside it. Still, a story spreads. An innkeeper at the crossroads, wiping down rough tables as the fire gutters, tells travelers of the young king who married a plain Frey girl because he had given his word. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, John thinks, when a northern scout repeats the tale to him by a campfire. Yet the moral is clear. A man may lose love, may risk alliances, but he must not break an oath. Then there is a first time for everything, and in this telling, a king chooses duty over desire. For most who listen, it is not honor that matters. It is timing. Whether Robb's vow-keeping means their village burns this year or next. Whether the Frey Queen's kin arrive as shields or wolves. As rumors of marching dead drift south, another fear takes root in the small folks' hearts. When winter truly falls, will any bridge, any king, remember them at all? Comparing timelines. Red Wedding World versus Frey. Queen World. In one world, the rumors end at a feast. In that world, the song is cut off by crossbow bolts, and a pregnant queen is stabbed beneath the twins' painted rafters. Robb feels the music turn sour, the air grows suddenly thick, and then there is only steel. No time for strategy, no letter to ponder. Ain't no claim to weigh. The young wolf dies with his crown still on his head, and the north wakes the next morning leaderless. In this world, the song never stops. It simply changes. Robb stands beneath the same rafters, but a Frey girl is at his side, her hand cold and small in his. The bedding is awkward, the smiles strained, yet no arrows fly. Walder Frey drinks, counts the toasts like coins, and feels something tighten around his own neck. Obligation. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The twins are no longer a slaughterhouse hidden in plain sight. They are a bridge the Starks can cross at will, a stronghold anchoring the river lords to Robb's cause. Canon gives us a single night of horror and a lifetime of echoes. The north fractured, the riverlands burned, the Freys reviled from White Harbor to Sunspear. Here, the horror is slower. Robb wakes each morning beside a wife he did not choose and feels the weight of every life bought with that choice. The tragedy is not that he dies. The tragedy is that he lives long enough to know exactly what his father's honor demands of him. Catelyn's arc bends along a different line. Instead of her last breath spent clawing at Walder's throat, she must watch that thin, sharp-eyed girl call her son Lord and husband. Her grief for Ned, for Bran and Rickon, is joined by a quieter resentment. That duty has taken even Robb's smile. Arya, in canon, drifts through the Riverlands haunted by the Red Wedding, her list sharpened by the memory of a slaughtered brother. Here she hears a different word on every road. Frey. Not as curse, but as queen. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Sansa. In King's Landing receives no tale of a murdered king in the north to harden her against the Lannisters. Instead, she hears that her brother has grown more cautious, more distant, almost Tywin-like in his patience. Walder himself trades the brief satisfaction of betrayal for the long, grinding fear that comes with proximity to a rising house. Tywin, deprived of his neat, treacherous solution, must bleed for every mile. Even the minor lords feel the shift. In one timeline, they die nameless at a feast. In this one, they grumble about Frey tolls, march when summoned, and live long enough to see Jon's banners appear beside Robb's. Thematically, the world tilts. In canon, honor is punished swiftly and without mercy. Here, honor still exacts a terrible price, but it can also bend the arc of history rather than be broken by it. And then there is a first time for everything. One wedding vow, kept instead of broken, redraws the map. The Freys move from footnote to fulcrum, the north from shattered to shielded. And as word of dragons and dead men walks south, the question becomes unavoidable. What does a king like Jon inherit from a brother who chose duty over desire and survived? The limits of honor. Did Robb actually make the right choice? Jon inherits more than banners and borders from Robb. He inherits a question. If a brother can bend his own heart to keep one vow, does that truly make the world better, or does it only trade one kind of horror for another? The North whispers about the Red Wedding that never was, as if it were a ghost, something half imagined, half feared. They know the songs of the butchered wolf in another life. If they can almost taste the blood that did not fall. In this life, Robb chooses the Frey girl and closes that door. No crossbowmen in the gallery, no music turning to murder. Yet the choice has a cost. With the twins secured, the war does not end in a single, shocking betrayal. It grinds on. Years of raiding into the Westerlands. Years of Riverland's fields burned on both sides. Years where every word from the front might be a father's death notice. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. It also changes who suffers, and for how long. Robb feels that weight every time he looks at his Frey queen. As king in the north and trident, his duty is clear. Hold the crossings, hold the line, hold the realm together for Jon's claim. As a young man who once dreamed of choosing his own bride, his duty is something colder, and he has traded the heat of sudden love for the slow ache of obligation. Is that noble or simply tragic? He does not know. He only knows it was necessary. Catelyn watches them and thinks of another marriage, another alliance forged over her own broken hopes. She tells herself that this is the price of peace, that her son has done what his father would have done. Yet, in the quiet moments, she wonders if peace bought with her child's joy is peace at all, or just a different war fought inside his chest. Walder Frey, by contrast, has no doubts. To him, Robb did the only right thing. He kept his word. The old lord struts through his drafty halls, puffed up with new titles, his grandchildren married into the Stark line. This is justice as he understands it, slight repaid with honor, not steel. Ask a northern lord, though, and the answer shifts. The great Jon will say, a king who keeps his oaths is worth bleeding for, even if it means another winter of campaigning. A Stark, remembering a son left unavenged after Robb spared Lannister cousins, might mutter that a king who loves too little is as dangerous as one who loves too much. And the small folk, a Riverlands peasant whose village now sits beneath the shadow of a fortified, loyal twins, may whisper that this is better than the stories of that other world. No red wedding, no sudden slaughter of guest and host. But her husband still marches. Her sons still vanish into levees. The banners change, the hunger does not. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that breaking the Frey pact and dying young might have spared the realm a longer, crueler war. Yet, there is an argument there. A swift, even infamous massacre might have shattered northern resistance early, forced Jon into a desperate, narrower claim, and shortened the years of burning. Honor without the Red Wedding means more living wolves, more stubborn defiance, more time for dragons and dead men to draw near. It means a king who keeps his vows, and a kingdom that keeps bleeding. Then there is a first time for everything. In this turning of the wheel, the honorable choice does not clean the board, it only rearranges the pieces. And as those pieces drift toward King's Landing and the Wall both, the question waiting for Jon is harsher still. When the dead finally come, will his brother's righteousness be their salvation or their ruin? What this reveals about Westeros itself. In that sense, Robb's choice at the twins is not just about one girl. It is a measure of how breakable this world really is. One wedding feast in a drafty hall over a muddy river decides whether the young wolf dies with a song or grows into a king who might actually threaten the Iron Throne. Robb feels that every time he looks across the Green Fork. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. The fragile order of Westeros, all these great houses claiming ancient right and unshakable honor, can be turned on its head by a 19-year-old lord choosing between a promise and a pretty face. A single marriage pact shifts the food lines, the march routes, the loyalties of half the Riverlands. It is not a grand council that decides the fate of kingdoms. It is a betting. House Frey makes that nakedly clear. Walder is not driven by love of king or father or realm. He is driven by the quiet, bishy-gnawing rage of a man who has stood aside at too many tourneys. The Freys want a better claim, a better name, a better seat at every table. They will swear to a Tully, then a Lannister, then a Stark, so long as each oath buys them another rung up the ladder. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. Yet in truth they are only a slightly uglier mirror of the realm around them. Robb sees it in their eyes as he walks the twins' halls with his new Frey bride on his arm. These are not loyal bannermen in the northern sense. These are accountants of honor, weighing each word, each slight, each lost advantage. The system has taught them that vows are coins, not chains. Break them when it profits you. Clutch them when it does not. And caught inside that system, Robb's private torment becomes the story's central wound. Heart versus duty. And the girl he might have loved versus the bridge he needs. The memory of his father's stern lessons versus the living faces of men who will die if he falters. Honor tells him to keep his word. Survival whispers that sometimes a king must break it. Jon will feel that same split later, between his claim and the truth of what the North actually needs from him. Underneath, the world itself is moving on quieter axes. Grain stores at the Twins, the distance from Moat Cailin to River Run, the way a Frey marriage binds the crossings as tightly as any chain. This is not a tale of pure heroes and villains. It is a tale of supply lines, river fords, and bedchambers. By tracing this gentler path, where the Red Wedding never comes, we see how close the realm stood to a different future. And in that closeness, the canon path feels less like blind fate and more like a series of human choices, each one that might have broken another way. Then there is a first time for everything. The wheel could have turned here. The question is where it turns next, when word of this unbroken alliance reaches King's Landing and the Wall. Alternate endings. 3 possible futures for the Frey. Wolf word of this unbroken alliance does more than unsettle King's Landing. It forces the entire game to tilt around a single, improbable fact. The Freys are not plotting murder in the shadows of their bridge. They are polishing a crown for the girl who has just become their queen. In the first future, Robb wins. Not in a Song of Heroes way, but in the slow, grinding way that comes when supply lines hold, when the twins stay open, when Walder Frey's vanity is chained to Stark victory. Robb rides from battle to battle with his Frey wife at his side, learning to temper the wolf's charge with the bridge lord's caution. He lives long enough to grow from boy king to seasoned war leader. The North and Riverlands harden into a true kingdom, a Stark Frey dynasty that can summon 50,000 men at a word. When the White Walkers spill past the Wall and Daenerys lands with dragons and Essosi steel, this Robb does not stand alone. He stands as a northern king whose banners do not fray at the edges. It is triumphant, yet uneasy. Because if this is truly the case, then it changes everything about who gets to decide the fate of the living. In the second future, the twins still hold, but victory never quite arrives. Tywin bleeds them year after year. Yes, Stannis refuses any compromise with Jon's claim, and the war against the Lannisters turns into a war against exhaustion itself. Robb dies not at a feast, but in the press of steel on some nameless riverbank, shielding his Frey queen or Grey Wind's broken body. His last thought is of his father's letter, and the brother who took the heavier crown. His Frey heir inherits a north that is proud but tired, riverlands that are loyal to the wolf, but wary of the bridge. Every lord measures this young king against Robb and finds the echo wanting. The Freys struggle to hold a realm that never fully accepts them, always hearing the unspoken judgment. You are necessary, but you are not loved. It is tragic, yet dignified, because the young wolf dies as he always feared he would, trying to live up to his father's name. Then there is a first time for everything. In the third future, Robb bends. Not to Joffrey, not to Tywin, to necessity. After years of deadlock, Jon's claim and Dany's dragons force a reconfigured Westeros. A great council where Robb walks in, not as rebel, but as broker. He lays down the crown of the North in exchange for written, ironclad autonomy for the right to rule Winterfell, the Riverlands, and the Twins as a king in all but name. His Frey marriage becomes the hinge of a new order, a stable crossing between southern court politics and northern bluntness. It sounded like madness when I first read it, too. Yet the image of Robb as a Lord Paramount who chooses his people over his pride feels painfully true to the boy who wept over Ned's body. This future is compromised, but survivable. Which of these feels closest to the harsh truth of this world? Which ending would haunt you most? The uneasy triumph, the honorable fall, or the quiet surrender that saves thousands? With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name. But which name, and in whose hall, is a question the next part must answer. Zooming back to the twins. The night. Everything changed, so we return to the question the whole river of this story flows from. Not a battlefield, not a dragon's shadow. A drafty hall above the Green Fork, where a young king stands before a line of girls and knows that whatever he says next will echo from the twins to Winterfell. Robb Stark faces Walder Frey's brood again, but now we see the weight differently. The torches along the walls hiss and pop. Then the banners of the crossing hang limp in the stale air. Walder leers from his high seat, fingers drumming, every inch the petty lord who thinks himself a kingmaker. Catelyn stands at Robb's shoulder, feeling the eyes of the north and the riverlands on her son. This is where the war for his own heart is fought. He studies the Frey daughters and granddaughters, their nervous curtsies, their hopeful, frightened eyes. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that a simple marriage pact could decide the fate of kingdoms. Yet here, in this hall, it is truer than any prophecy. Robb is not just choosing a bride, he is choosing which dead he can live with. In one unseen future, the answer is different. In that path, he rides away from the twins with a promise made and later broken. It is with a Westerling girl at his side and a death song waiting in these very rafters. We glimpse it now, crossbow strings snapping in the dark, the direwolf's howl cut short, the young wolf bleeding out as Lannister gold and Frey treachery drown the music. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. But in this timeline, he does not turn away. Before he speaks, the hall holds its breath. The Great John's hands clench on his sword belt. The Karstarks watch with hard, appraising eyes, measuring their king's honor against their own grief. Catelyn's fingers twist in her skirts, remembering another feast, another lord, another promise her husband once made and kept. Walder smirks, certain he has cornered a wolf. Silence stretches. Robb thinks of his father's letter, of Jon's claim, of the north that raised him and the Lannisters, who murdered his king and his father. He sees flashes that no one else can see. A Frey queen wrapped in furs at Winterfell's high table. A dark-haired Stark Frey heir chasing a direwolf pup through the Godswood snow. A field of trampled banners where he himself lies still, crown askew, but his standard unfallen. In canon, he chooses love later and pays with his life. Here, he chooses the Frey girl and pays with something less visible, but no less real. He feels the loss like a sword sliding between his ribs as he opens his mouth and lets his boyhood die. Then there is a first time for everything. He names his bride. Walder's smirk breaks into greedy triumph. With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name. Bean not knowing how much of himself he has just buried in this hall, or how many futures have been slain so that one wounded, compromised, but survivable path might live. Theme check, duty, identity, and the cost of being a Stark. The cheering in the Twins' Hall rings in Robb's ears long after it fades. It sounds like victory. It feels like a funeral. In that moment, the old words of his house press down on him, heavier than any crown. Winter is coming. For Ned Stark, those words had never been a boast. They were a warning, a command to think of the next season, the next generation, the next hard choice. Robb hears his father's voice as clearly as if the letter were in his hand again. Keep your word, even when it cuts. Marrying a Frey girl is not a romantic gesture. It is the ultimate expression and the harshest test of that Stark code. He remembers Jon in the snow of Winterfell's yard, laughing as they traded wooden swords, dreaming of glory. Robb had been the heir, Jon the bastard, both of them free to imagine a future in which honor and happiness might walk side by side. Now, as king in the north and lord of Winterfell, Robb understands the truth Ned never had time to teach them in full. Sometimes honor devours happiness. Sometimes keeping your word means burying the boy you were. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. It reframes what it means to be a Stark. In the songs, Starks are noble victims, betrayed by Lannisters and Freys, cut down because the world is too cruel for their honor. In this timeline, the story twists. Robb is not simply the prey of treachery. Ojai is an active shaper of his fate, choosing a path that hurts him first so his people might bleed less later. This is where his two identities collide. Robb, the young man, in love with another woman, who wants a marriage like his father had with Catelyn. Robb, the king, whose claim, whose very name, is bound up in oaths sworn before gods and men. The Frey marriage forces him to pick one. There is no clever escape, no secret annulment, no hidden letter that erases vows spoken in front of 100 watching eyes. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that the same choice making him more Stark might also make the world harsher for his blood. Yet that is the irony. By doubling down on duty, by binding the twins to Winterfell with a Frey bride and future heirs, Robb creates a North that is stronger, more entangled, and far more complicated. His children will inherit not only a name and a direwolf, but the grudges and ambitions of House Frey, the expectations of River Lords, and the memory that their father chose duty over love. Then there is a first time for everything. Perhaps this is the first Stark generation that cannot pretend honor is clean, because the real heart of this what if is no longer simply, does Robb live or die? It becomes, what kind of man walks out of the twins' great hall, and what kind of North will he build from this sacrifice? When the snows finally fall, will his people bless him for the pain he embraced, or curse the cold, calculating king he is about to become? The answer starts to take shape the very next morning when the ravens begin to fly. Your turn. Which Robb do you believe in? The ravens fly. Oh, but before we chase them across the map, this is where you come in. Because beneath all the banners and battle lines, this entire what if rests on a single choice. Which Robb Stark do you believe in? Do you stand with the Robb who follows his heart, breaks his word, and dies to the music of the Red Wedding? Or do you stand with the Robb who swallows that same heart, keeps his vow to a Frey girl, and walks out of the twins' great hall alive, a colder, harder king in the making? If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. Robb pauses in that imagined dawn after the feast, feeling the weight of the ring on his finger. You can almost hear his father's voice in the back of his mind, asking which price a Stark should pay, the price of honor, or the price of love. When you choose between these two Robbs, you are really choosing what you value most in a story. Do you want the sharp, clean cut of romantic tragedy, a young wolf dying for one impossible promise? Or do you prefer the slow, grinding gears of political realism, where vows are tools, not shackles, and survival is its own kind of wound? Imagine yourself not as a distant reader, but inside this world. As a Northern Lord, would you rather swear to the fallen hero, whose name becomes a war cry, or to the compromised survivor who keeps your sons alive, but marries you to House Frey forever? As a peasant in the Riverlands, trampled by horsemen in Stark colors and Lannister red alike, which Robb feels like mercy, and which feels like yet another distant king? As a Frey standing on the battlements of the twins, do you scheme against a faithless wolf? Or do you bind your fate proudly to a Stark who honored your house? When you go to the comments, think of futures, not just moments. Does your Robb become a victorious king of the North and Riverlands, holding the Green Fork and the twins as his unbreakable spine? Does he remain the fallen hero of canon, his death the spark that twists Arya, Sansa, and Jon down darker paths? Or is he something in between, a compromised survivor whose crown is lighter than it looks? Because every night he sees the Frey Queen beside him and wonders what he traded away. How would you write her? Is she a quiet, clever partner who learns the truth of the letter about Jon and urges Robb toward alliance? A resentful daughter who turns against her father and the Lannisters alike? Or a tragic figure, loved by no one, that yet holding the North together simply by existing at Robb's side? It sounded like madness when I first read it too, but then there is a first time for everything. Your interpretations, your headcanons, your own letters from father to son, these are the lifeblood of this kind of story. This is a sandbox, not a single verdict. So choose your Robb, choose your queen, and choose the North you believe they will build. With that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name. But which name are they shouting in your version? inviting the next what if in the Stark saga. So, if, in your version, Robb keeps his Frey vow and the twins turn from grave to gateway, where does that leave the rest of the Stark story? If this is truly the case, then it changes everything, because once you move that one stone, and other moments start to wobble, does a more secure Robb, with a Frey bride at his side and the green fork held fast, fight Tywin differently? And does that make it more likely that Ned survives King's Landing at all? Imagine word reaching Robb that his father escaped the Lannisters through Varys' tunnels, that the letter he thought was a farewell becomes a summons. Robb as Lord of Winterfell, Ned as hand to some new king. Jon no longer the overlooked snow in the shadows, but a living question of blood and claim standing between them. Or follow Jon instead. In this Frey-kept timeline, the North is not shattered at the twins, so perhaps the truth of his parentage does not wait for crypts and dragonfire. Perhaps Ned lives long enough to speak plainly, or Catelyn, still watching her son's Frey wife with wary eyes. He presses too hard and uncovers the truth meant to die with her husband. Jon learns he is Rhaegar's son while Robb still lives, while the banners of both Wolf and Twin Towers fly together. It sounded like madness when I first read it too. But if Jon's claim rises while Robb's crown is still a possibility, what does brotherhood look like then? Then there is Sansa. In a world where the Red Wedding never comes, does she still endure every cruelty in King's Landing? Or does a living Robb, with Frey riders and river lords at his back, force a different bargain from the Lannisters? Picture Sansa slipping away earlier, traded for Jaime, under a pact Ned might have made if he lived, returning to a Winterfell ruled by Robb and a Frey lady, her place at court suddenly uncertain. From here, the branches only multiply. What if Robb lives long enough to meet Daenerys herself, the Wolf King of the North, and the Dragon Queen of the East, measuring each other across a painted table? What if a Stark Frey heir sits in Winterfell when the dead finally come south, the twins serving as the last true bridge for refugees fleeing the long night? Or, perhaps darkest of all, what if Walder Frey still chooses betrayal, even after the marriage, selling out both his own blood and his king to Tywin when the war turns? So now the question turns to you. Which Stark what if do you want to open next? Ned surviving the capital, Jon's parentage revealed while Robb still breathes, Sansa escaping sooner, or something no one has spoken of yet. Leave your letters, your oaths, your favorite Stark divergences in the comments below. We will build this branching north together. And in doing so, see more clearly why the canon path cuts so deep. Because every step we take shows how easily some other word, some other choice, could have spared them. If you want to see your scenario forged into a full deep dive like this one, make sure you are here when the next raven flies. Closing the book on the Frey bride. For now. So, we close this branch where it began, in that tense, smoky hall at the Twins, with a young wolf and an old lord weighing a bridge against a bride. It sounded like madness when I first read it too, that such a small word, I will, could unmake a massacre and raise a whole new kind of winter crown. From that crossing flows everything. Robb stands before Walder Frey not as an oathbreaker begging pardon, but as a Stark who keeps his word even when it tastes like ash. The music never turns to knives, the cups never fill with poisoned wine, and the twins become a living artery for the war effort, not a tomb. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. We have walked that altered road together, through riverlands where Frey banners ride beside Karstark and Umber, through Westerlands where Robb and his Frey queen watch Lannister towers burn from the safety of a secure supply line, through a north that never has to mourn its king in chains. Tywin must scheme in the open instead of behind wedding doors. His gold bleeds away in long campaigns instead of buying a single night of treachery. Yet the victories are not clean. The Karstarks still seethe, their lord still executed by a boy who must be king and father and judge all at once. The Freys, bound by marriage, are less likely to betray, but their old grudges do not vanish. They simply look for new cracks in which to grow. Pain does not disappear from this timeline. It moves. In the distance, we glimpse the Dragon Queen steering her course toward a very different north, one where a living Robb Stark and his Frey-born heirs stand between her and the Iron Throne. Jon still bears his hidden claim like a secret fire, his father's letter still whispering that the truth of his birth could upend every oath sworn in that gods would. Then there is a first time for everything, a world where Robb's survival forces Jon and Daenerys to treat the North not as a broken supplicant, but as a partner with teeth. Is it better? Worse? The realm does not answer. There is only a different scattering of graves, a different map of burned fields and spared villages, a different balance of who bends the knee and who stands. And at the center of it, always, that quiet image, Robb and his Frey queen in some drafty chamber of the Twins or Winterfell, two young people bound by politics and winter, trying to hold together a realm they did not build but must now carry. He remembers his father's voice, the weight of every promise Ned Stark ever kept. She remembers her own father's sharp eyes, the price of failure in a house that counts insults like coins. In a world like Westeros, sometimes the bravest thing a king can do is keep a promise he wishes he had never been forced to make. Robb does, in this telling, and with that, the gathered lords all raise their swords and cheer his name, unaware that every cheer is also a choice, and every choice for one future is a quiet farewell to another. His final call. Rewrite the North in the comments. The hall at the Twins echoes with that unseen choice. Robb has kept his vow, taken a Frey bride, and turned a grave into a stronghold. If this is truly the case, then it changes everything. But from this point on, the road is no longer mine to chart alone. It belongs to you. So, my lords and ladies watching, choose one stone in this altered river and tell me where the current runs. Picture Walder Frey, old hands shaking as he lifts a cup, not in treachery, but in genuine loyalty to the young wolf who honored his word. Does he send his sons riding with Robb into the Westerlands, or does he clutch the Twins, counting tolls and insults as always? Take that single change, and in the comments, write a short scene, a single outcome, as if you were there in the hall when the decision is made, or ride south in your mind to Tywin Lannister's war council. There is no red wedding to end this quickly, no easy knife in the dark. Does Tywin risk open battle against a united Stark-Frey host entrenched at the Green Fork? Or does he burn the Riverlands to ash to starve them out? It sounded like madness when I first read it too, the thought of Tywin forced into a fair fight. Yet, in this timeline, perhaps there is a first time for everything. Choose that moment instead, and write the clash as you see it. You might even leap years ahead, to a quieter chamber lit by dragonfire. A Stark-Frey heir, Robb's child with his Frey lady, stands before Daenerys and Jon as they speak of the North, of the Iron Throne, of the price of peace. Does this heir bend the knee to the White Dragon? Or press a rival claim in the name of the River Lords and the Twins? In a few lines, you can decide whether this marriage becomes the bridge that unites kingdoms, or the crack that breaks them. And over all of it, let Walder Frey's shadow linger. In this world, with his blood tied to Winterfell and the North, is he redeemable, even a little, as the grandfather of Northern royalty? Or does he inevitably find some quieter, pettier way to stain his legacy, trading on his grandson's crown for one more slight answered, one more toll collected? Argue his soul in the comments, defend him or condemn him, but do not leave him unjudged. Do not stop at a single path either. Read each other's scenes, reply, twist them, build on them. Let one loyal Walder lead to a different Tywin. Let a different Tywin force a different meeting with Daenerys. As until we have branching timelines where Robb's Frey marriage births a dozen futures. If you want more of these deep what-if journeys through the Stark story, remember to like, to subscribe, to share this with any friend who still argues over the Red Wedding and the Young Wolf's claim. We began with one question. What if the Young Wolf kept his vow? That question is answered only in part. The rest is yours. The North, this time, will be rewritten by your hand. Write it below.